Chapter 328. Go to watch net. Su Chan let out a cry as she was washed away by the tide of plastic bags. But she quickly struggled to stand up. Her 165-meter-tall body was only left with half of her body, submerged by the small plastic bags that suddenly gushed out of the room. She stared at the plastic bags under her in shock, then picked one up and saw a few words written on it. Fujian Tai Guanyin. At this time, Li Yundong also found that his room was full of tea bags. He was stunned and said, "What's going on? Why are there so many tea leaves?" Just as he was puzzled, he suddenly heard the sound of keys at the door. Then the door was pushed open and Ruan Hongling and Ziyuan walked in with big bags. Go to watch net. The two female disciples of the Linggong sect were shocked to see so many people in the room, especially the female disciples of the Fox Zen school. Ruan Hongling's eyes widened and she said in shock, "What's going on?" Then she saw Li Yundong and Su Chan, who was drowned in Tai Guanyin tea, and suddenly burst out laughing. When Ziyuan saw Li Yundong and Su Chan standing in the sea of Tai Guanyin tea, she couldn't help but smile. Ruan Hongling said to Li Yundong, "Hey, who told you to open the door? Don't you know how much effort Shiji and I put into piling up these tea leaves?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why are they all piled up in my room?" Ruan Hongling laughed and said, "You still have the nerve to say that? You let us two girls come back to do these things, while you are leisurely in Dongwu City. We worked hard to move so many tea leaves from the first floor up, but you are still picky. Let me tell you." Ruan Hongling wanted to say more, but Ziyuan glared at her and shouted, "Hongling, don't be presumptuous in front of the leader of the Fox Zen school." The implication of Ziyuan's words was very obvious. She was reminding Ruan Hongling that Li Yundong was not someone she could yell at casually. He was the leader of a sect. Only then did Ruan Hongling react. She snorted with a resentful face and swallowed the rest of her words. Chowie was quick-witted and quickly reacted. She stepped forward, bowed to Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling, and said, "Amateus, sorry to disturb Jinren Ziyuan and Jinren Hongling." Ziyuan smiled faintly and returned the greeting. "You're welcome. How can I disturb you?" When the others of the Fox Zen school saw Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling come in, although they did not take the initiative to come forward to show their goodwill like Chao Yi, most of them stood up one after another, maintaining a vigilant and distant attitude. Ziyuan also knew that although she had participated in the siege of the Fox Zen school last time, and had secretly helped the Fox Zen school, she could be regarded as the benefactor of the Fox Zen school. Watch net. 7K. OM. However, the grudge between the Fox Zen school and the Jingyi school was too deep. Moreover, Yan Fong was the second Sherbua of the Linggong sect, and had a very close relationship with him. Yan Fong had almost caused the destruction of the Fox Zen school. It would be a lie to say that there was no resentment in the hearts of the Fox Zen school. Ziyuan was well aware of this, so she didn't care about it. She just smiled gently at them, and then said to Li Yundong, "Jinrenli, can I have a word with you in private?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay, let me put all these tea leaves back first." After that, he controlled his junshi and swept all the tea bags back into the room like sweeping the floor. Then, he used his junshi to block them so that none of them fell out. Su Chan, who was beside him, quickly took the opportunity to close the door with a bang. She patted her chest and said with lingering fear, "I was scared just now. Did Zheng Yuming bring all these tea leaves here?" Li Yundong spread his hands. "Is there someone else?" Su Chan rolled her eyes. "Then where will you sleep at night?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "I'll sleep in the living room with you." At this time, Ziyuan said, "Jinrenli, if you don't mind, you can stay at our place for the night." Li Yundong hesitated for a moment. "That's not good, is it?" Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "It's okay, but I have 2 questions to ask you." Li Yundong nodded and went to Su Chan's bedroom with Ziyuan. After closing the door, he asked, "Do you want to ask me why I brought all the disciples of the Fox Zen school home?" Ziyuan saw that Li Yundong was getting straight to the point. She thought that Li Yundong would avoid this question, so she couldn't help but be stunned. Seeing her expression, Li Yundong laughed and said, "I know that you will think too much when you see this scene. Yes, the people of the Fox Zen school are all intelligent foxes, and all of them are stunning beauties. Normally, it would be enough to cause a great uproar if one of them came to the human world, let alone so many of them. So you have doubts in your heart about whether I have selfish motives or not, right? Ziyuan also laughed and said, Amateus Shimrenli, you are so frank. It seems that I was overthinking. Li Yundong waved his hand and said, If I were you, I would also think too much. However, I really have my own difficulties in bringing them down the mountain. Even if you didn't tell me, I would have told you. Go to the internet. 7K. OM. Ziyuan asked curiously. Oh? What's so difficult about the famous Shimrenli? Li Yundong sighed and said, Don't tease me. There's no one else here. Given our friendship, there's no need to be so polite. As he said this, he told Ziyuan what had happened to him before, and then said, Such a tragedy has occurred in our Fox Zen school, and even a mortal has been implicated. This matter is really a thorn in my heart, making me restless. Ziyuan said with a serious face, Do you suspect that there is a traitor in your Fox Zen school? Li Yundong said, Yes. Now the Fox Zen school is suffering from internal and external troubles, and the situation is extremely bad. Not only has its economic lifeline been cut off, but the food, clothing, housing and transportation of a group of people have also become a problem. Moreover, the major sects are still not giving up on the Fox Zen school. Yesterday, I found a gangster peeking at the heavenly Jindan technique in the secret room of the Fox Zen school. I think if the news that the heavenly Jindan technique is in the hands of the Fox Zen school gets out, our Fox Zen school will not have a good life. Now I don't know how many enemies are coveting us outside, and I don't know if there is a traitor inside. If there is, who is it? So I brought them all down the mountain. Everyone is together, so it's convenient for us to monitor each other. Ziyuan nodded slightly, and there was a look of admiration in her eyes. She said, Do the other people of the Fox Zen school know that there is a traitor in the sect? Li Yundong shook his head and said, No, I only told Su Chan, Zhou Qin and you about this. I think if they know, they might suspect each other. At that time, the hearts of the whole sect will be scattered. At that time, I will be the leader of the sect in name only. Ziyuan sighed softly and looked at Li Yundong sympathetically. It's really not easy for you to be the leader of the sect. Li Yundong chuckled and said, I received orders in the face of danger. Moreover, for the sake of Su Chan, I have to persist. I can't let her sect be destroyed in my hands. Ziyuan's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes and sighed. You are really a man of affection and righteousness. Li Yundong waved his hand and said, I think I may cause you a lot of trouble in the future. After all, there are 11 people in the Fox Zen school, including Su Chan. Sometimes I can't look after them alone. I have to find a house for them tomorrow, and we have to find a store as soon as possible and open it. Otherwise, if we just sit here and eat, it won't be long before there are only 80 yuan left of the 800,000 yuan. Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, You're right. We really have to increase our income and reduce our expenditure. Otherwise, if a group of cultivators die of poverty and starvation, it will really be the biggest joke in the cultivation world in the past 5,000 years. Li Yundong chuckled and said, But at night, I want to ask you for a favor. Ziyuan asked in confusion, What kind of favor? Li Yundong said, I want to see if the bodies of the 2 golden snakes are still there. Ziyuan asked curiously, Why do you want to see them? Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, I'll tell you the reason tonight. I can't answer until I've seen them. Ziyuan smiled and changed the topic. Well, since we've made things clear, we should face a bigger problem now. Li Yundong asked, What's the problem? Ziyuan pointed outside the door and said, There are so many people. How are we going to feed them? Are we going out to eat or eating at home? Li Yundong couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. There are so many people. If we go out to eat, I'm afraid it will be too noisy. We'd better eat at home. Ziyuan began to roll up her sleeves and said with a smile, Then we should get started now. It won't take a while to prepare a meal for more than a dozen people. Li Yundong laughed and said, "Fortunately you're here. Otherwise, I'm afraid that my waist would break if I were to do it alone." Ziyuan said, "Li Yundong, it's not that I want to criticize you, but you have to find a way to get out of these mundane things. Otherwise, you won't even have time to practice, and your cultivation will not progress at all. You have to know that cultivation is like sailing against the current. If you don't make progress, you will fall back. If you don't make progress, maybe someone will defeat you next time." Li Yundong thought of the young man from the Blue Cave sect who had come to provoke him. He couldn't help but look serious. He said, "You're right. When I solve the problem of food and clothing for the Fox Zen school, I can free up my hands to cultivate." Ziyuan nodded and didn't say anything. After the two of them went out, they went into the kitchen and began to get busy. Wan Hongling went in to help, but Su Chan was still forbidden from leaving the kitchen by Li Yundong, so she had to watch TV in the living room obediently. The little foxes surrounded the TV curiously and kept chattering, but after watching for a while they got tired of it. More people surrounded Su Chan curiously and asked her to tell them about all kinds of things she had encountered in the secular world. The little girl was crazy when she saw a group of people surrounding her. She also became interested and talked about her coming to the secular world. But after she came to the secular world, she had never left Li Yundong's side. Naturally, she talked about him between the lines, especially when she said that she had smashed the TV with a punch and made Li Yundong owe a lot of money. The two of them had huddled in the small room and depended on each other. Her face showed a happy and sweet smile. It would have been better if she hadn't said it. As soon as she said it, a little fox suddenly understood and said, "Oh, it turns out that the leader will only like you if you make him in debt." The other little foxes nodded in unison, and then their eyes rolled around. They couldn't help but think of something to destroy, so that the leader would remember them. But after looking left and right, their eyes finally fell on the TV, and they were all ready to make a move. Su Chan was shocked and hurriedly stood in front of the plasma TV, like an old hen protecting her chicks. She said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" Immediately, the little fox of the Fox Zen school said sourly, "Only you can cause trouble, but we can't do something to make the leader remember us?" Su Chan was so depressed that she was so anxious that her forehead was sweating. She said loudly, "Yundong works very hard to make money. Shouldn't we help him? If you cause trouble at this time, you will only make him angry and hate you." Her appearance made Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, chuckle. However, she felt that she was not a member of the Fox Zen school, so it was not appropriate for her to speak. She just watched the fun from the side. Su Chan's words made the little foxes hesitate again. Chao Yi also scolded, "Scoundrel, what nonsense are you making? Aren't you afraid that the leader will drive you back?" It had not been easy for these little foxes to go down the mountain. After seeing this kind of colorful world, how could they be willing to go back? They immediately shook their heads like a rattle drum. Only then did they give up the idea, and give up one by one. Su Chan patted her chest with lingering fear. "Thank goodness. Those lawless bastards almost tore this house apart," she said, patting her chest with lingering fear. "No, these guys are so naughty. I have to help Yundong keep an eye on them." At this time, Li Yundong walked out of the kitchen with a plate of food. It was a plate of golden braised meatballs. He shouted, "Kids, get ready to eat." His cooking skills were excellent, and the food he made looked, smelled, and tasted good. With Ziyuan's help in the kitchen, the two chefs worked together, so the food they made was naturally not ordinary. For a moment, all the people of the Fox Zen school in the room stared at the plate in Li Yunyang's hand with their eyes wide open. As elders, Chao Yi and the others could still bear it, but they thought to themselves, "How can the leader be so good at cooking? The food he makes is really fragrant and makes people drool. It seems that we will have good food in the future." If they were like this, the little foxes were even more unbearable. They watched Li Yundong put the plate on the table and suddenly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. At first, they could barely hold on, but when Li Yundong turned around and entered the kitchen, they suddenly shouted and rushed to the table like robbers. They didn't even need chopsticks and reached out to grab the food. Su Chan was dumbfounded. It took her a long time to react. She stomped her feet and said angrily, "Bastard, it's my specialty to steal food." After that, she pounced on him with bared fangs and brandished claws, joining the fight. Chapter 329. Go to watch net. When Li Yundong came out with another dish, he was shocked to find that the braised meatball and brown sauce he had brought out before was gone. All that was left was a dish with a dim soup, lying alone on the table, looking very miserable. Go to watch net. Li Yundong said in shock. Did I offend a robber? What's going on? As soon as Su Chan saw Li Yundong, she immediately turned around. Her mouth was pouting, and her face was full of grievance. Tears kept welling up in her eyes. Seeing her like this, Li Yundong thought that she had been bullied. He was shocked again and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Su Chan sobbed and said in a choked voice, "Yundong, I didn't get any just now." As soon as her voice fell, Li Yundong burst out laughing. As he laughed, the others in the room also laughed. The more aggrieved the girl was, the angrier she became. She was so angry that she hit Li Yundong with her fist. She stamped her feet and said angrily, "You're so annoying. How dare you laugh at me?" Li Yundong quickly turned back to cover the dish and said with a smile, "Hey, be careful. If you spill it, you won't have anything to eat." Only then did Su Chan notice that there was a braised bream on the plate in Li Yundong's hand. She immediately drooled and said eagerly, "This time, I want to take the first bite." Li Yundong looked up and saw that the disciples of the Fox Zen school, big and small, were all craning their necks to look at him. They were all staring at the plate in his hand with green eyes. He thought to himself, "Oh my, this is simply a group of hungry ghosts who haven't eaten for thousands of years. I'm afraid that this dish will be eaten immediately after I put it on the table." Li Yundong hurriedly took the dish and walked into the kitchen. Seeing that he had actually turned around and left, Su Chan immediately shouted, "Hey, where are you going? I want to take the first bite." Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "This fish will be gone in one bite. When the dishes are all ready, I'll bring them up together. Otherwise, if I bring one up, you guys will eat one at a time." After that, he slammed the kitchen door shut. Su Chan was depressed. She rushed to the door and pounded on it with her fists, shouting, "Yundong, I'm starving. Let me eat something first." She knocked on the door for a while, and it suddenly opened. Before the little girl could close her mouth, Li Yundong stuffed something into her mouth and closed the door with a crash. Something was stuffed into the little girl's mouth. At first, she thought that Li Yundong had given her a piece of delicious food, but when she bit it, she found that it was extremely hard. Not only could she not bite it, but it almost broke her teeth. Watch net. Su Chan lowered her head and spat out the thing in her mouth. It turned out to be a walnut, and it was an uncracked walnut. Su Chan immediately stomped her feet and said, "Wow, you actually hit me with a hard walnut. I don't care. I don't care, I want to eat." At this time, Li Yundong opened the door again and asked with a serious face, "One is not enough? Those two." As he spoke, he handed over another walnut. Su Chan was so angry that she grabbed the walnut and walked to the living room angrily. She sat alone on the sofa and sulked. Li Yundong laughed and closed the door. In the living room, everyone from the Fox Zen school covered their mouths and snickered. When Xiaoyi saw the little girl peeling walnuts in anger, she held back her laughter and walked over to Su Chan. She handed her a braised pork head in brown sauce and said, "Chaner, I have another one here. Why don't you eat it first?" Su Chan turned her head and saw that the braised pork head in brown sauce had already been bitten. How could she eat it now? She became more and more depressed in her heart and said angrily, "No, I don't want to eat anymore." At this time, everyone from the Fox Zen school burst out laughing. Some little foxes took pleasure in Su Chan's misfortune and whispered sarcastically, "That's good. There's one less person to fight for food. We can eat more." When Su Chan heard this, she immediately beat her chest and stamped her feet in her heart, regretting it. She thought to herself, "Idiot, why are you being angry with yourself? If you don't eat, won't you starve?" However, she had just said those words out of anger. She was thin-skinned and couldn't take them back for a while. She just rolled her eyes and thought about what excuse to find to eat later. About half an hour later, the kitchen door suddenly opened. Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, and Ruan Hongling all came out with 2 plates in their hands. They went in and out a few times, and brought out more than a dozen dishes. For a moment the table was full. Ruan Hongling looked at the dishes on the table, and felt proud of herself. She shook her head and said, "Fortunately, I'm wise and powerful. I've long anticipated this situation, and bought so many dishes. Otherwise, everyone would just be waiting to eat the northwest wind." Zi Yuan laughed and scolded. "Would you die if you didn't show off?" Li Yundong waved his hand and said, "Kids." The juniors of the Fox Zen school all smiled and answered crisply, "Yes." Li Yundong hadn't expected them to be so funny. He immediately laughed and said, "Get ready to eat." The little foxes had been waiting for him to say this for a long time. Suddenly, their eyes turned green, and they rolled up their sleeves, ready to rush forward. "Go to the net." 7K. OM. Li Yundong was shocked when he saw them like this, as if they were about to break through the enemy lines. He quickly shouted, "Stop!" Just one shout from him was enough to stop the experts of the various sects from moving, let alone these little foxes. When the little foxes heard Li Yundong shout, they all froze and looked at him in confusion. It seemed that they didn't understand why they were not allowed to eat when all the dishes had been served. Li Yundong said with a straight face, "You guys are swarming up like a swarm of bees and robbing. What's wrong with that? Little ones, listen up. Go find your own chairs and sit in an orderly manner." The little foxes of the Fox Zen school replied with a smile, "Yes." Then they all ran to other rooms to find something to sit on. Someone shouted, "Leader, there are no chairs left. What should we do?" Li Yundong also said loudly, "Then stand." Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, suddenly teased with a smile, "Master, why do I feel like you are the Golden Horn King in the journey to the west? An old monster with a group of little monsters under his command?" As soon as she said this, Chao Yi and the others from the Fox Zen school looked at her, and smiled without saying anything. Li Yundong smiled indifferently and said, No, I am clearly the ruler of the country of women. It's just that the one in the journey to the west is a female ruler, and I am a male ruler." Only then did everyone notice that there were more than a dozen people in the room. But Li Yundong was the only man. The others were all stunning beauties. Ruan Hongling scolded with a smile, "You must have been a bachelor for 9 lifetimes to have such a good luck with women. TSK, there are so many beautiful women in this room, but you are the only man. If God finds out about your luck with women, I'm afraid you will be struck by lightning." Zi Yuan shouted, "Hongling, don't talk nonsense." Li Yundong chuckled and said, It's okay. He waved his hand and motioned for everyone to sit down. He was the leader of the sect, so he was elected to sit at the head of the table. Chao Yi and the other elders of the Fox Zen school sat on his left. As the future leader of the Linggong sect, Zi Yuan was Li Yundong's teacher and friend, so she naturally sat on the right side, and Ruan Hongling sat next to her. Li Yundong was about to assign other people's seats when Su Chan suddenly walked over slowly. He suddenly laughed and asked curiously, "Hey, didn't you say you didn't want to eat?" Su Chan had originally hoped that no one would remember this matter, so she could fish in troubled waters and come over to eat. Who would have thought that when everyone saw her coming over, they would tacitly understand and not say anything? However, Li Yundong had brought up this matter. He really touched a sore spot. Su Chan stamped her feet and said angrily, "I asked you for food just now, but you pretended not to hear me. Why did you hear this?" Li Yundong wanted to tease her, so he chuckled and said, "I didn't hear a lot of things just now, but I did. Didn't you say you didn't want to eat? Why are you going back on your word?" Su Chan snorted, as if she had been prepared for this. She said proudly, "Humph, I only said that I didn't want to eat, but I didn't say that I didn't want to eat vegetables." As soon as she said this, everyone laughed. Li Yundong tapped Su Chan's nose and scolded her with a smile. "Sly girl. Well, you pass. Sit next to Chao Yi and eat." As he said this, he turned to Zhou Qin and said, "Zhou Qin, you sit next to Su Chan, the others could sit at will." There were more than a dozen people at the table, and for a moment, the table was full. Everyone looked at the dishes on the table eagerly, and then looked at Li Yundong eagerly. Their chopsticks were hanging in the air, waiting for Li Yundong's order to go forward and start eating. Li Yundong saw that Zhou Qin, who was usually the most shrewd and had the strongest willpower, couldn't stop swallowing. It was obvious that she was very hungry. He didn't wait any longer and said with a smile, "Well, let's start." As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd cheered and pounced on him. Li Yundong saw that for a moment, the dishes and chopsticks were flying on the table, and their arms were the same color as the tablecloth. He suddenly took a deep breath and thought, "Oh my God, this is not starting to eat. This is clearly a war. Do these guys think they're fighting?" Li Yundong saw Su Chan snatch a bowl of dishes and wolf down her food. He couldn't help but stand up, stretch out his chopsticks to knock Su Chan's bowl, and shouted, "Hey, you're a cultivator. Eat slowly." Su Chan replied with an "oh," but her speed was not slow at all. Li Yundong was so angry that he knocked on her bowl again and shouted, "Hey, if you eat so fast, I'll take your bowl away." Su Chan quickly turned around and covered the bowl with her body. She muttered vaguely, "Zhou Qin is also eating so fast. She is your disciple. Why don't you scold her?" Li Yundong turned his head and saw that Zhou Qin's bowl was also full. She had completely lost her usual ladylike image. Li Yundong stared at her and said, "Hey, don't you pay attention to your image?" Zhou Qin smiled dryly and said, "Master, I'm an ordinary person, not like you cultivators. If I don't eat my fill, I won't have any strength." As she spoke, she stuffed 2 more pieces of duck meat into her mouth. Li Yundong was depressed. He turned to look at Zi Yuan, ready to ask for reinforcements. He said, "Zi Yuan, look, why don't you say something? You." Before he could finish his words, he suddenly saw Zi Yuan. Seeing that the crowd was really fierce, she frowned and simply dragged the 2 vegetarian dishes in front of her. Fortunately, the people of the Fox Zen school were a group of hungry ghosts who had never eaten meat before. They were all focused on grabbing the meat dishes. No one noticed that Zi Yuan had dragged 2 plates of vegetarian dishes away by herself. But they didn't notice that Li Yundong was stunned. He said, "Zi Yuan, you're not joining in the fun, are you?" Zi Yuan looked at him helplessly and said, "Cultivators also have to eat." As she spoke, she didn't stop. Although she was still eating in a gentle manner, she was not eating slowly. Li Yundong saw that the 2 dishes in front of her were quickly eaten up by her and Wan Hongling. Li Yundong saw that the group of hungry ghosts had almost thrown themselves on the table, and he couldn't even see the dishes. He stared blankly, took a deep breath and said, "Oh my God, you're not eating but fighting. Well, since you're not polite, I won't be polite either. Look at my sweeping away the clouds." He shouted loudly, and the chopsticks in his hand clanged twice, making 2 crisp sounds. When everyone heard his shout, they raised their heads one after another. Li Yundong was just about to put down his chopsticks when he saw that after everyone stood up, the table was revealed. All the dishes on the table had been swept away. It was empty, and there were no dishes left. Li Yundong was dumbfounded and said, You actually snatched up all the dishes in less than a minute?" Everyone looked at each other and laughed dryly. Su Chan stuck out her tongue, took a soup bowl over and said, "Yundong, there's still some soup here." Li Yundong took the soup bowl and saw that there was only clear soup in it. There wasn't even any green onion in it. He couldn't help but say frantically, "Damn it, you are really a group of female bandits. You didn't leave anything for me. And you even said that the elders should respect me. I'm the one who cooked this meal. You didn't leave anything for me." Chowie smiled apologetically and said, "Leader, I still have braised pork head here. Do you want it?" Li Yundong said angrily, "Give it to me. It's better than nothing." But when he took a look, he found that the braised pork head had been bitten off. How could he eat it? Li Yundong was so angry that he couldn't help but feel dizzy. Suddenly, he heard Wan Hongling say loudly, "By the way, there's still." Li Yundong couldn't help but be overjoyed. "What else is there in the kitchen?" Wan Hongling said slowly, "There are 2 pots of rice in the kitchen. Li Yundong, you can eat this braised pork head, and then eat 2 pots of rice." After that, the women burst into laughter. Li Yundong burst into tears. F***ck. This is not a romantic encounter. This is clearly suffering. Chapter 330. Go to watch net. As the leader and chief chef, Li Yundong couldn't even eat a bite of the food he made. He felt that his days were really dark. Go to watch net. After eating a bowl of rice, Li Yundong, who was very depressed, began to rearrange the accommodation of a group of people. After some discussion, Ziyuan took the initiative to say, "Why don't the disciples of the Fox Zen School and I rest in the living room? You can stay in my room, and Ruan Hongling can stay in her own room. The others will stay the same. What do you think?" Li Yundong pondered for a moment and hesitated. Unexpectedly, when Su Chan heard that Li Yundong could stay in a room alone, she immediately smiled and said, Okay, that's it." Li Yundong looked at her strangely, and Chao Yi and the others next to him also agreed. That's right. Li Yundong thought for a moment. Ziyuan was also a woman, and all the members of the Fox Zen School were women. They could avoid suspicion if they stayed together. Li Yundong nodded in agreement, but he quietly glanced at Ziyuan. The two of them looked at each other and nodded secretly. In the evening, after everyone had fallen asleep, Li Yundong went out of his room with his Yin spirit. As soon as he came out of his room, he saw that Ziyuan was already waiting for him on the balcony of his house, floating like a fairy. This time, Li Yundong's Yin spirit was still in the appearance of a young man. He smiled at Ziyuan and said, "How long have you been waiting?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "Not long. I just got my yang spirit out of my body." She looked at Li Yundong up and down and sighed slightly. "The last time your Yin spirit went out of your body, you already looked like a young man. Now you still look like a young man. Your cultivation hasn't improved at all." Li Yundong also sighed and said, "Yes, I only needed to take care of the little girl in the past. 2 mouths were naturally easy to deal with. Now there are more than a dozen mouths waiting to be fed. The burden on my shoulders is not light. I have to find a way to make money, so that I can have the mood to cultivate." Seeing his worried face, Ziyuan comforted him in turn. "You don't have to worry. There will be a way when the car comes to the mountain, and the boat will go straight when it comes to the bridgehead. It will get better." Li Yundong was also a naturally optimistic person. He chuckled and said, "I was just sighing casually. Let's go. Ziyuan nodded, and the two of them quickly turned into a beam of blue light and left. When the two of them flew to the top of the mountain where they had buried the 2 big golden snakes, Li Yundong landed and saw that the flat ground had been dug up, and the 2 big golden snakes inside had disappeared. Watch net. 7K. OM. Li Yundong said with a sullen face. "Sure enough, it's gone." Ziyuan frowned and said, "Actually, I haven't figured it out." "Why did you suddenly want to see if the golden snake is still there?" Li Yunyang said with a cold face. "I've always felt that someone was secretly spying on our Fox Zen School. Especially after Zhang Sunhong died. I found a figure peeping at the heavenly Jindan technique in the secret room. I was more and more sure of this feeling." Ziyuan suddenly said, "I understand. So you came here to see if these 2 big golden snakes are still there. If they are, it means that all of this may be a coincidence. If they are not, it means that someone has been spying on you from the beginning." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Yes, that's true. It's very likely that this person has been following us and watching where we buried the golden snakes. Then after we left, he came back to take out the bodies of the 2 golden snakes." Ziyuan asked, "Could it be Zheng Yuan who did it?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "It's also possible that Zheng Yuan came back, but it's unlikely. This mountain is so big. How did he know where we buried the golden snakes? The person who has been following us all the time must have a higher cultivation than us if he can't be found. With such a person staring at me from behind, I feel like I can't eat or sleep in peace." Ziyuan comforted him. "Don't worry too much. Maybe a villager happened to see them and dug them up." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You know that's impossible. This kind of mountain is so sparsely populated that no one comes here on weekdays. The top of the mountain is even more rugged. Only cultivators like us who can fly can come up. How can ordinary people come up? Moreover, We buried them so deep that if someone hadn't seen us buried here with their own eyes, they wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. Ziyuan sighed and said, "Then who could it be? It's really an eventful time." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "In my opinion, this person has either used the scales or fangs of the golden snakes to make powerful magical weapons, or Niden and flesh to improve his skills. When the time comes, we will see which powerful magical weapons in the cultivation world are related to these. And we will probably be able to guess who dug these 2 golden snakes away. As long as we find this person, we will be able to find the mysterious person who is watching the Fox Zen school." Ziyuan nodded and said, "There's another possibility. Let's go to the internet." Li Yundong asked, "What is it?" Ziyuan said, "They may be using the Niden of these 2 golden snakes to refine the Jindan. As I said before, the Niden of the golden snakes is a necessary medicinal material for refining the Diyuan Jindan. Without this medicinal material, it's impossible to refine the Diyuan Jindan." Li Yundong suddenly understood and said, "So whoever refines the 3 great elixirs of life may be the mysterious person?" Ziyuan nodded and said, "It's very likely." Moreover, this big golden snake said that the Medicine King tripod was about to appear. Now that these 2 golden snakes have been stolen, I always feel that a great storm is brewing in the cultivation world. This matter is very likely to involve your Fox Zen school and our Linggong sect." Li Yundong's face darkened and he nodded. After a while, he let out a long sigh and said, "Yes, I also have the same feeling. It seems that someone is plotting against the Fox Zen school." Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "It's okay. There will always be a day when the truth will come to light. If someone really wants to plot against the Fox Zen school, you can deal with all kinds of changes with an action and wait for the other party to show up." Li Yundong said, "You're right. We should solve the financial problem first, and then find a way to strengthen the strength of the Fox Zen school. As long as we are strong, the other party can't do anything to us." Ziyuan praised, "That's right." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then let's go back." The 2 of them didn't stay for long and flew all the way back. It only took them 2 or 3 hours to go back and forth. At this time, Su Chan was secretly observing Zhou Qin in her room to see if she had fallen asleep. After watching for a long time, she heard Zhou Qin's soft breathing. Only then did she confirm that Zhou Qin had fallen asleep. She quietly got up, opened the door, and was ready to sneak into Li Yundong's room. But when she arrived at the living room, she saw that Ziyuan was meditating in the dining room. The young disciples of the Fox Zen school were lying on the carpet in the living room. Su Chan was about to carefully pass by them. But suddenly, these girls opened their eyes in unison and stared at Su Chan. Su Chan was sweating in her heart. She felt as if she had been caught red-handed, and cold sweat broke out on her back. The little girl smiled dryly, raised her head and said, "Ah, the moon is so beautiful today. I'm going out to bask in the moonlight." "Well, bask in the moonlight." The little foxes gave a meaningful, "Oh," in unison, and then said in unison, "Then we also want to bask in the moonlight." Su Chan's heart was filled with hatred. These stinky girls, how dare they fight with me? They were actually waiting for me here. She put her hands on her hips, lowered her voice and glared at them. "Little girl, I'm going to find my master. If you have any objections, stand up." The little foxes gave another, "Oh," in unison, then giggled and closed their eyes. Seeing that they had stopped making noise, Su Chan quickly slipped away. She also knew where Ruan Hongling's room was, so she slipped to the balcony of their house, pushed the door open, and slipped in quietly. The little girl was proficient in the art of invisibility and hiding. In addition, Ruan Hongling was meditating, so no one noticed her sneaking in. When she found Li Yundong's room, Li Yundong's Yin spirit had just returned. The little girl saw a flash of blue light, and a young man threw himself on Li Yundong's body. Li Yundong slowly woke up. The little girl held her breath and watched attentively. After Li Yundong woke up from his meditation, his eyebrows were furrowed and his face was full of worry. After a while he sighed, turned over and fell onto the bed, ready to sleep. The little girl walked over quietly, and was about to climb into bed. Unexpectedly, as soon as her body touched the bed, Li Yundong suddenly turned over and shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" Su Chan appeared, shushed him and said with a smile, "It's me, master. Don't you know me?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "It's you? Why are you here?" Su Chan looked at Li Yundong eagerly and said, "Sister Zhou Qin, you stole my quilt when I was sleeping. I can't stand the cold, so I came to you for warmth." As she said this, she thought to herself, "Sister Zhou Qin, I'm sorry. I let you be a bad person this time. Next time, I will definitely repay you." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You want to be warm? But I'm also very cold. What should I do?" Su Chan refused to believe him. She giggled and said, "No, my master is the warmest. Forget it, I want to crawl under the quilt." As she said this, she lifted the quilt and crawled in. But as soon as she got in, she found that Li Yundong's quilt was really cold. Li Yundong's body was even colder. She screamed because of the cold, and tried to crawl out with her hands and feet. As she crawled, she shouted, "Why is your body so cold? I'm freezing to death." Li Yundong laughed. How could he let the little girl crawl away? He grabbed her back and said, "Where are you going? We'll share blessings and misfortunes together." The little girl struggled and said angrily, "I'm freezing to death. I'm freezing to death. You're going to freeze your little girl to death." Li Yundong's yin spirit came out of his body. Most of the yang qi in his body shrank in the lower dantian of his lower abdomen, and the rest turned into yin spirit and ran out. There was only yin qi left in his body, so naturally his whole body was cold. He laughed and said, "Little girl, your master is also very cold. Please warm me." When Su Chan heard this, she stopped struggling. She turned her head and looked at Li Yundong pitifully. "Well, I'll warm you up, but you can't deliberately freeze me." After that, the little girl snuggled into Li Yundong's arms and breathed on his chest. She rubbed her hands together for a while, then rubbed them back and forth on Li Yundong's arms. As she rubbed them, she blinked at Li Yundong. "Uncle, are you warm?" she asked. Li Yundong's body was not warm, but his heart was warm. He looked at the little girl lovingly, and the look in his eyes became gentler and gentler. He suddenly held the little girl tightly in his arms and said lovingly, "Silly girl." After that, the majestic and vigorous yang qi hidden in the lower dantian of his lower abdomen surged out, and his body suddenly became warm. The little girl was in Li Yundong's arms. Originally, she was afraid that she would be frozen into a popsicle, but as soon as her body touched Li Yundong's, she found that his body was warm. She immediately smiled and said, "Master, your body is warm. Did I warm you?" Li Yundong looked at the little girl in his arms with a smile and said meaningfully, "Yes, you warm me. With you here, I can warm up no matter how cold my body is." The two of them looked at each other in the dark room. Under the moonlight, they could see each other's bright eyes. The two of them smiled at the same time, and their smiles were full of sweetness and happiness. Chapter 331. Go to watch net. The two of them snuggled up to each other, listening to each other's heartbeats and breathing each other's breaths. After a long time, Li Yundong suddenly smiled and said in a low voice, "Girl, we haven't been so intimate for a long time, have we?" Su Chan smiled sweetly and said softly, "Yes, we haven't kissed for a long time." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then let's have a kiss?" Without thinking, Su Chan immediately leaned over and gave Li Yundong a hard kiss on the cheek. Then she shrank back and giggled. "Go to watch net." Li Yundong deliberately pretended to be dissatisfied and said, "You can't just kiss on the cheek. How old are you? You can't kiss on the cheek." Su Chan's cheeks were very red, but she was not afraid of being seen by Li Yundong at night. She giggled and said, "Then where should I kiss?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Of course it's to kiss." Su Chan rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Then close your eyes." Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, "Fool, you can't see your own fingers in front of you. Why should I close my eyes? If you don't kiss me, I'll kiss you." It's a big crime to make me kiss you on my own initiative." Su Chan let out a cry and asked timidly, "What kind of big crime?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, Pull up your pants and spank your butt. Su-chan twisted her body and said coquettishly, No, my butt will be broken. Li Yundong touched it with a smirk and said, Let me touch it. How can it be broken? Su-chan giggled and grabbed his hand. She smiled and said, Okay, I'll kiss you. After that, she pouted and moved closer to Li Yundong, kissing him on the mouth like a chick pecking rice. How could Li Yundong allow her to run away? He grabbed her and kissed her heavily. At first, Su-chan was still giggling, but as Li Yundong's tongue pried open her teeth, Su-chan's soft body seemed to turn into a pool of spring water, softly melting into Li Yundong's arms. The little girl was kissed by Li Yundong until she kept moaning. When their lips parted, the little lass wiped her wet lips and giggled. My mouth is numb. You are so annoying. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Little girl, when I asked you to give it to me, you said that I hadn't reached the Juji phase yet. Hee. Now that your master has reached the Juji phase, and is your leader, you have to give it to me, right? As he spoke, his hand moved towards the little lass's soft chest. Watch net. The little girl was startled and laughed. She quickly covered her chest with her hands, and shook her head like a rattle drum. She said in a panic, Here? No. How could Li Yundong agree? He grabbed a jade rabbit on the little girl's chest and said with a smile, What don't you want? Could it be that you don't want to stop? Su-chan struggled and said with a smile, You're so annoying. Li Yundong hugged the little girl, bit her ear, and said with a smile, Don't you know this joke? Well, I'll tell you. It was said that there was a beautiful girl who was often molested on the bus. Later, she told her mother about it, and her mother taught her. Next time someone touches your upper body, you should shout no. And if someone touches your lower body, you should shout stop. When the girl heard this, she secretly kept it in mind. As a result, she was molested on the bus again, and this person touched her upper and lower body at the same time. So the girl shouted, Don't stop. Li Yundong chuckled, and touched the girl's most secret and precious place with his other hand. He said with a smile, Are you going to shout no too? Hearing this, Su-chan pressed her chin tightly against her chest, lowered her head and giggled. She said with a smile, You don't want to stop. Li Yundong laughed and said, Yes, I won't stop. Only then did Su-chan realize that she had said something wrong. She hit Li Yundong's chest with her fist and scolded him with a smile. You're so bad. You only know how to take advantage of me. No way, not here. Li Yundong begged with a sad face. Girl, your master has been away for a long time. Don't you feel embarrassed to leave him alone like this? Su-chan stuck close to Li Yundong and begged. Sir, I'm all yours, but I really don't want to do it here. This is Jinren Ziyuan's room. I feel so awkward. Li Yundong's face turned serious, and he pretended to be angry. Then why did you come here to seduce me? Su-chan giggled and said, I just came here to keep warm. Li Yundong said with a straight face. You're here to keep warm. But what if there's no one to put out the fire when I'm on fire? Su-chan was so shy that she covered her face with her hands and giggled. Then what do you want me to do? I just don't want to be here. I beg you, sir, I'll give you whatever you want. Li Yundong said with a gloomy face. You make it sound nice, but you won't give me anything substantial. Go to the internet. 7K. Humph, big hoodwinker. Su-chan buried her head in Li Yundong's arms and said coquettishly, Well, sir, be good. Your cultivation is rising now. Don't break your yuanyang body. It would be a pity. Li Yundong couldn't help but say in shock. Last time you said that you would wait for me to reach the Juji phase. And this time you're talking about it. Can I only see it, and not eat it for the rest of my life? Su-chan scratched Li Yundong's cheek with her fingers and said with a smile, Shame on you. You're the leader of a sect, but you're thinking about these things. You're so shameless. Li Yundong said seriously, Nonsense, with a group of vixens like you. How can I be serious? After that, he said with a salivating face, Besides, the sages also said that food and lust are human nature. The matter between a man and a woman is a human relationship. What's there to be ashamed of? Su-chan giggled and said in a sweet voice, Anyway, you're right. If you can't do it, then you can't. This is Ziyuan's room, and Ruan Hongling is still next to it. I don't want to be here. Besides, now that you're so powerful, I can't take your yang to make up for my yin. But what if you take my yin away? Wouldn't that make me even weaker? Li Yundong let out a long sigh and said, in the end it still doesn't work. Oh my god, did you deliberately send such a demon to punish me? Zhou Qin said that I must have been single for 9 lifetimes to cultivate my luck with women in this life. I think I must have been too dissolute in the past, so I sent a little demon like you to torture me in this life. Hearing this, Su Chan giggled and said, Sir, in the way of dual cultivation, it's not that you pick me or I pick you. It's very difficult for 2 people to pick each other and then improve their skills. Unless, Li Yundong hurriedly asked, unless what? Su Chan rolled her eyes and said with a smile, unless our skills are about the same. You take the yin qi in my body for your own use, and I take the yang qi in your body for my own use. This is called dual cultivation. Only the way of balance is the king. Otherwise, if one side is weak, it will be easy to die. You should know that when the human essence gate is opened, it is also the time when a person's defense is the weakest. If they are not careful, they will be possessed by the devil and be doomed eternally. Li Yundong said with a sad face. Oh my god, is dual cultivation still so dangerous? How long will it take for you to catch up with me? Su Chan giggled and said, that depends on how well you teach me. Li Yundong said with a bitter face, this is something that distant water can't put out a nearby fire. As he spoke, he suddenly had an idea. He thought for a moment and said seriously, well, I'll teach you a peerless divine kung fu that has been unparalleled in the past 5,000 years. Su Chan vaguely felt that Li Yundong's words were not good, but she still pursed her lips and asked with a smile, what kind of divine skill? Li Yundong grabbed the little girl's hand and put it down, then said with a righteous expression, 5 dragons embracing the pillar magic skill. Su Chan retracted her hand with a cry and blushed. She laughed so hard that she fell into Li Yundong's arms. She giggled and said, you're so bad. What kind of divine skill is this? Li Yundong said with a serious face, don't underestimate this kind of divine skill. This is a peerless divine skill that can be used to put out fires and eliminate disasters. If it weren't for this set of divine skills, I'm afraid it would be difficult for you to keep your virginity today. Seeing that Li Yundong was scaring her with a straight face, Su Chan also pretended to be timid. She carefully reached out her hand and said tentatively, then I'll try. Seeing that he had spent a long time talking, Li Yundong finally got something. He immediately laughed, and his face was like a flower. Well, young people should be brave to try. As the saying goes, true knowledge comes from practice. Before he could finish his words, he suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Hey, do you think you're pulling a radish? Su Chan replied weakly. Oh, then what should I do? I don't know how to do it. You teach me. Li Yundong sighed, raised his right hand and said to Su Chan, look, this is your senior. The 5 dragons embracing the pillar magic skill has been cultivated to the 9th level, the 9th level. Come over and say hello to your senior. Su Chan giggled and touched Li Yundong's right palm. She deliberately said, greetings, senior. There are so many calluses on your face. Li Yundong was furious. Be asterisk starred, there are no calluses. No one has calluses on their face. Su Chan laughed so hard that she almost choked. She said with a smile, well, there are no calluses, no calluses. Li Yundong snorted and raised his right hand high, looking like a fraud. That's more like it. How dare you not respect the old? Hurry up and kowtow to the ancestor 3 times. Su Chan was born to laugh, but she had also met Li Yundong, who loved to joke around. She laughed so hard that her eyes curved into crescent moons. She sat up solemnly and kowtowed 3 times to Li Yundong's right hand on the bed. After Su Chan finished kowtowing, she blinked at Li Yundong and said, done. Li Yundong pretended to be displeased. There's no sound at all. You're not sincere. Su Chan said with a wronged expression, we're on the bed. How can we make a sound? Li Yundong snorted and turned his head away. That's none of my business. Su Chan rolled her eyes, giggled and kowtowed again. This time, every time she kowtowed, she would make her own dong-dong sound. Li Yundong almost laughed when he heard this. He glared at her and said, "Do you think you're doing a film and TV show? You're actually doing your own dubbing." Su Chan threw herself into Li Yundong's arms with a smile and said coquettishly, "Well, master, I've already acknowledged you as my master. Don't make things difficult for me." After that, her eyes suddenly fell on Li Yundong's left hand. She couldn't help but ask, "By the way, your right hand has cultivated the 5 dragons embracing pillar to the 9th level. What about your left hand?" Li Yundong was stunned, but he quickly said, "Your left hand belongs to your Shenyang. She cultivates another set of magic skills." Su Chan asked with a smile, "What kind of magic skills?" Li Yundong snorted and said, "Your Shenyang cultivates the yin yang palm. If you don't believe me, why don't you let her experiment on you?" After that, he moved the 5 fingers of his left hand maliciously, looking Su Chan up and down and smirking. Su Chan quickly hugged Li Yundong's right hand and said, "I'll cultivate the 5 dragons embracing pillar." Li Yundong had a cunning smile on his face. He said with a smile, "Then hurry up and cultivate." "Oh," Su Chan said weakly. "Then don't blame me if I don't cultivate well." Then she stretched out her hand towards him. Li Yundong closed his eyes with an intoxicated expression. After a while, he opened his eyes again and looked at Su Chan helplessly. "Are you playing the guqin? Can you use a little more strength? Oh, hey, be gentle. Are you kneading dough? Oh, hey, do you think you're drilling wood to make a fire? Oh." The two of them struggled for a long time, and Su Chan finally found some tricks. Li Yundong was also gradually getting into a good mood. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Chan, or don't stop." Su Chan raised her head and blinked at Li Yundong. The little girl's face was particularly delicate and charming in the moonlight. Her charming eyes were like silk, and the corners of her eyes were curved when she smiled, which was indescribably attractive. Li Yundong couldn't help but hold the little girl in his arms and kiss her. Their tongues were entangled together. Just as Li Yundong was about to lose control, they suddenly heard a sneer in their ears. Humph! This sound was like thunder piercing through their ears, and Li Yundong and Su Chan were so shocked that they jumped up, and the desire in their bodies faded away. Chapter 332. Go to watch net. Li Yundong and Su Chan were whispering to each other when they suddenly heard such a cold snort. Only then did they remember that Ruan Hongling was still living next to them. Go to watch net. 7K. OM. Su Chan was so scared that she froze in Li Yundong's arms for a while, like a frightened deer. After a long time, she stuck out her tongue at Li Yundong and said angrily, "It's all your fault. You made a fool of yourself." Li Yundong chuckled and said in a low voice, "You made too much noise." Su Chan punched Li Yundong in the chest with her pink fist and said angrily, "You're so annoying. You screamed too loudly." Li Yundong cried out, feeling wronged. "You made too much noise. That's why I screamed." Su Chan was embarrassed and annoyed. "How did I make a scene? You were the one who made a scene." She flew into Li Yundong's arms, scratching and biting. "I told you to say it. I told you to say it again." Li Yundong laughed and covered Su Chan's mouth with his hand. "She'll keep your voice down, or you'll get scolded." Only then did Su Chan calm down. She was like a general who had returned to the court after a victory. "Humph, I'll let you go. However, you should cultivate this 5 dragons embracing pillar divine art yourself." After that, she smiled slyly and said, "I'd better not practice it, in case someone talks about me later." Li Yundong was depressed. He thought to himself, "Why is there always someone who spoils my good things? Next time I'm going to do something bad. Should I have my fortune read in advance? Isn't this too much?" Li Yundong sighed and fell onto the bed. Su Chan got up with a smile and covered Li Yundong. She smiled and said, "Yundong, I'm going back." Li Yundong's expression was one of despair. "Ah, you're leaving? You're just going to leave me alone? You don't want me anymore?" Su Chan giggled. "I snuck out. I'm going back." After that, she bent down and kissed Li Yundong on the forehead. She said softly, "Be a good boy. The girl will treat you well in the future. She won't abandon you. Li Yundong looked pitiful. Oh, you have to keep your word. Su Chan had seen Li Yundong's awe-inspiring appearance many times, but she had never seen him like this before. She suddenly burst into laughter, and her heart was filled with sweetness and joy. Her heart almost softened, so she stayed back. But on second thought, she still walked to the door and whispered in a low voice, "Grandpa, I'm leaving. Little lass will miss you." Li Yundong blinked at her. "Oh, I'll miss you too," he said. Su Chan opened the door and blew him a kiss at the door. The corners of her eyes were full of charm. She giggled and turned to leave, leaving only the floating fragrance and the voice and smile that seemed to be in his mind. Go. 7K. OM. Li Yundong looked at Su Chan's departing figure in a daze. After a long time, he chuckled and waved his hand, closing the door in the air. He rested his head on his arms and looked at the ceiling, as if he could see the frown and smile of a girl there. He couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile. When his Yin spirit had just returned, he had felt that the Fox Zen school was in trouble from both inside and outside, and the living environment around him was extremely dangerous. But now he felt that the world was so beautiful. No conspiracy or mysterious enemy was worth mentioning. It was as long as the girl was by his side, even if the sky fell, he would not panic at all. What's there to be afraid of? At worst, we'll just deal with whatever comes our way. If someone wants to touch the Fox Zen school, I will destroy their sect. But right now, it's better to find a place for these beauties who can bring disaster to the country and the people to live. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to handle so much food every day. As Li Yundong thought about it, he slowly fell asleep. At dawn the next day, he woke up. As soon as Li Yundong opened the door, he found that Ruan Hongling was playing 5 animals frolics on the balcony. She was a rare beauty, and her figure was graceful. At this time, she was wearing a close-fitting sportswear, which made her look even more slender and elegant. When Ruan Hongling heard the sound, she turned her head and saw Li Yundong. She immediately snorted and said sarcastically, "Jinrenli, did you sleep well last night?" Li Yundong felt embarrassed in his heart. He thought to himself, "You little girl, you really know how to touch my sore spot." Li Yundong raised his head and laughed dryly. "The weather is really good today." Ruan Hongling snorted coldly. "If Sister Ziyuan knew that you were in her bed." Li Yundong was shocked. He hurriedly bowed and said with an apologetic smile, "Jimren Hongling, you are chivalrous and righteous. You won't betray me, will you?" It was the first time that Ruan Hongling had the upper hand in a quarrel with Li Yundong, and it was extremely rare for Li Yundong to take the initiative to show weakness. She was secretly proud of herself, and the corners of her mouth involuntarily curled up. But soon, she put on a straight face and raised her chin high. I'm not sure." Li Yundong sighed and said with a serious face, "Since you refuse to let me go, I have to tell others that Jinren Hongling, a disciple of the Linggong sect of the Jingyi school, eavesdropped on us all night last night. If such gossip gets out, I don't know if it will be good or not." Ruan Hongling was furious. She stamped her feet and said, "Who eavesdropped on us all night? I only heard it for a while, okay?" Li Yundong laughed and clapped his hands. "Look, you admit that you eavesdropped on us." Ruan Hongling was so angry that she was going crazy. "Wow, how dare you slander me? It's obvious that you were too loud, so I heard it all." Li Yundong put his palms together and looked like an eminent monk. He said seriously, "Ba, the outer appearance is Zen, and the inner appearance is not chaotic. Go to the internet. If the outer appearance is Zen, the inner appearance is chaotic. If the outer appearance is Zen, the inner appearance is not chaotic. The nature is pure and self-determined, but the state of seeing and thinking is chaotic. If you see all kinds of states, and your heart is not chaotic, it is true. Jimren Hongling, your cultivation is not good enough." Ruan Hongling saw that Li Yundong was making a false accusation. He actually quoted scriptures to say that her concentration was not good enough. She was so angry that she rolled up her sleeves and said angrily, "How dare you use the Surangama Sutra to suppress me? Do you think that I, a Taoist, have never read Buddhist scriptures?" Let me tell you, I have read Buddhist and Taoist scriptures since I was 15 years old. Are you going to argue with me today? Li Yundong laughed. Just as he was about to speak, Zi Yuan's fairy figure suddenly flashed and appeared on the balcony. She looked at them in surprise and said, "Who wants to argue? What's so difficult about arguing so early in the morning?" Buddhists like to talk about Zen, and even more like to debate with others about Dharma. And debating about Dharma was called a debate. As soon as Zi Yuan asked this, Li Yundong immediately smiled and said, "No, I'm just playing with Hongling." As he said this, he winked at Wan Hongling and said, "Zhenren Hongling, don't you think so?" Wan Hongling was so angry that she opened her mouth. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly thought, "Oh no, this guy's skin is as thick as a city wall. When the matter gets out, he won't lose a single hair. But my reputation will be ruined by him. No, I can't do this kind of thing where I kill 10,000 enemies and lose 3,000 of my own." Wan Hongling glared at Li Yundong angrily, then snorted and turned her face away. Zi Yuan looked at her in confusion, then looked at Li Yundong and asked curiously, "What's wrong with you two? Why are you losing your temper so early in the morning?" Li Yundong quickly changed the topic and said, "By the way, are the little ones of the Fox Zen school awake?" Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, "They woke up before dawn. They all know that you will take them out to see the house tomorrow. They are all waiting for you to take them out for a walk." Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "I didn't say that I would take them out to see the house. With so many people running out, wouldn't it cause a tragedy?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Who asked you to be the leader of the Fox Zen school? Except for the mystical silver fox. All the leaders of the Fox Zen school have been keeping a close eye on their disciples. They are afraid that these fox spirits will run out and cause chaos in the world. You, on the other hand, just let them all go." Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan with a strange expression. "Why do I feel like you are gloating?" Zi Yuan pursed her lips and said happily, "You can tell? Is it so obvious? However, I really want to know how you, Zhenrenli, are going to deal with these fox spirits." As soon as she finished speaking, she heard the little foxes shouting in unison from outside, "Leader, get up! Leader, get up!" All of these little foxes had clear and soft voices. Their shouts were really like a flock of birds singing in unison. Li Yundong suddenly felt a headache coming on. Wan Hongling laughed gloatingly and said, Li Yundong, you have such a day." This time, it was Li Yundong's turn to glare at her. He turned around and walked to the balcony. Before the people in the community had time to poke their heads out, he quickly jumped onto his balcony. As soon as he landed, he saw the little foxes kneeling on the carpet neatly, ready to shout one by one. But when they saw him coming back, they immediately closed their mouths and looked at him eagerly. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, "Why don't you shout louder? Keep shouting." These little foxes looked at each other, stuck out their bright red tongues, and then turned their heads in unison to look behind them. Li Yundong also looked over and saw a person hiding behind the group of little foxes. She was stretching her head out, looking shifty-eyed and rolling her eyes. When this person saw Li Yundong looking over, she knew that she couldn't hide, so she poked her head out with a cheeky smile. Li Yundong saw that this person was both angry and happy, and had bright eyes. Who else could it be but Su-chan? Li Yundong said angrily, "Did you take the lead?" Seeing that Li Yundong was angry, Su-chan quickly lowered her head and walked over. She pretended to be sincere and said pitifully, "Leader, I won't dare to do it again." Then, taking advantage of the fact that her back was facing the group of little foxes, she mouthed silently, "I saw that Zi Yuan had gone over. I was afraid that she would see through us, so I called you over quickly." Only then did Li Yundong understand. He thought to himself, "This little girl is really a fox spirit. She's so cunning. But in front of me, I have to put on a good show. Otherwise, how can I lead this team in the future?" Li Yundong deliberately put on a serious face and said, "Forget it. As a punishment, you will wash my clothes for a month." When Su-chan heard this, her face darkened. But when the other little foxes heard this, they thought to themselves, "How is this a punishment?" They couldn't take it anymore. They got up and shouted, "Sect leader, please punish us too." Leader, let me help you wash your pants. Leader, let me help you wash your socks. There was also a beautiful little fox who said weakly, Leader, let me help you wash your underwear. Seeing that Li Yundong's things were all wrapped up, the one who had spoken late had no choice but to ask tentatively, Leader, shall I help you take a bath? These little foxes were all beautiful, and their voices were soft. Even an iron man would become soft. Li Yundong felt like vomiting blood. He thought to himself, although I am determined, I can't resist the seduction of so many foxes. Li Yundong scolded with a righteous expression. Be asterisk starred. How dare you make fun of the leader so early in the morning? Chao Yi, who was standing to one side, also scolded. Nonsense. Haven't you seen a man in several lifetimes? Are you so hungry that you can't be choosy? Li Yundong was about to respond loudly when he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Hungry that I can't be choosy? What does that mean? Am I so bad? Chao Yi usually looks like a very steady person. Why does she sometimes drop the ball? Li Yundong was depressed in his heart. Fortunately, Chao Yi's words finally became normal. Go back to your own business. Let the leader wash up. Get ready to go out later. Li Yundong thought to himself. I didn't say that I would take you out with me. Could it be that the girl said that? He glanced at Su Chan. Sure enough, Su Chan had a guilty look on her face. When she saw him looking at her, she quickly looked away. Li Yundong snorted twice and walked into the bathroom. Su Chan was clever and quickly rushed to the front, saying loudly, Leader, I'll help you squeeze out the toothpaste. The other little foxes sighed one after another. Oh, I didn't even get such a good opportunity to flatter him. This Shiji Su Chan is really close to him. I'm so angry. Li Yundong entered the bathroom and saw Su Chan handing him a toothbrush with toothpaste with a smile. Li Yundong glared at her and said, Bad girl, why did you let them all go out with me? Don't you think it's too messy? Su Chan said with a cheeky smile. Are you stupid? Are you looking for a house or are they looking for a house? If you don't let them go, they will be dissatisfied and make some trouble. Won't they just cause trouble for you? Li Yundong scolded with a smile. You're so smart. I think you wanted to go, but you were afraid that others would say it, so you gave them a fake imperial edict and encouraged them to go together. Su Chan's eyes widened, and her face was full of amazement. Master, you really have a keen eye. I can't hide anything from you. You're amazing. Li Yundong glared at her and said, Bad girl, don't do it again. After that, he suddenly turned his head to look at Su Chan and said, Hey, why don't you go out? Do you want to see how I pee? Su Chan covered her face and spat with a smile. I don't want to see it. It's so hairy. Li Yundong laughed. When he was done, he walked into the living room and suddenly found that not only were the members of the Fox Zen school all dressed up and waiting for him, but Zhou Qin and Su Chan were also dressed up, looking like they were competing for beauty. Even Zi Yuan and Wan Hongling were standing in the living room and looking at him. Li Yundong was stunned and stammered. What are you doing? Su Chan said with a smile. Leader, we are all waiting for you. Li Yundong was surprised and said, Zi Yuan, are you going too? Zi Yuan smiled slightly and nodded. If we have time today, we might as well go to the shop together. Besides, you can't let the disciples of the Fox Zen school live in one place while you live here alone. If something happens, how can you protect them? So let's find a place to live together. Li Yundong smiled bitterly. You're right. All right then, let's go together. As soon as he finished speaking, the little foxes who were looking at him eagerly suddenly cheered. They opened the door and rushed out like a swarm of bees, all cheering and waving their claws. Damn it! This is simply a group of little demons who have been released from the mountains. A group of demons is dancing wildly. An ominous thought suddenly flashed through Li Yundong's mind. These guys won't tear down Tiannan City, will they? Chapter 333. Go to watch net. Li Yundong first inquired about the community and found that there were no available houses in the community. He had no choice but to take all the members of the Fox Zen school out. As soon as they left the community, the little foxes made a lot of noise. They looked around and pointed at the high-rise buildings and shouted in surprise. Wow, I've seen that before. I saw it the last time I came here. It's so thick and big. Immediately, a little fox who knew more said seriously, Bah, it's so ugly. What do you mean by thick and big? That's called a thick building. Oh, it's also thick and big. Bullshit, you two don't know anything. That's called a high-rise building. Oh, what is it used for? I don't know. Maybe it's for living? Wow, can we live there? I don't know. It depends on leader. Go to WatchNet. 7K. OM. Alas, our leader is so poor that he probably can't afford to live there. Hearing this, Li Yundong's heart was burning with anger. He pressed one down, and the other jumped up again. It was really like pressing a gourd and raising a ladle. He was tossed around like a Buddha being born, and two Buddhas going to heaven. Li Yundong couldn't stand it anymore. He stood on the road with his hands on his hips and scolded loudly. Be ****. If you say one more word, I'll send all of you back to the mountain. After getting along with Li Yundong for the past few days, these little foxes had found that although Li Yundong was domineering and fierce when facing enemies, he was actually a very gentle and tender person. Although they saw that Li Yundong was angry, they also knew that he would not be so cruel as to send them back to the mountain. The little foxes giggled and didn't take Li Yundong's words to heart at all. They said in unison, We wouldn't dare, leader. But after they finished speaking, they quickly began to chatter again. Seeing that they didn't take him seriously so quickly, Li Yundong suddenly took a deep breath and thought to himself, Oh my God, I don't have any prestige. This is terrible. If this goes on, I, the leader, will be a big tragedy. Li Yundong glared at them, his face darkening. Hey, do you really think I wouldn't dare? He was about to speak again, but he saw Chao Yi and the others standing next to him covering their mouths and snickering. He was angry in his heart. Good heavens, they're all laughing at me. Li Yundong turned around and said to Chao Yi, Chao Yi Shirbua, why don't you take care of them? I really can't manage them alone. Chao Yi was snickering when she suddenly froze and said in surprise, Leader, let me do it? This isn't too good, right? Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, There's nothing wrong with that. You came at the right time. As he said this, he saw a small red flag on the side of the road with the words, Building a Civilized and Healthy City written on it. He picked it up casually, handed it to Chao Yi, and said, You go in front and hold this flag. This way, the little guys won't get lost when they see you. WatchNet. Chao Yi looked at the little red flag in her hand in a daze and said with a dry smile, Leader, that's not good, is it? As she said this, she looked at Lu Yuehong and Zhuang Yiting for help. The two of them were snickering. When they saw Chao Yi looking at them, they quickly turned their faces away and pretended not to know Chao Yi, as if they didn't know her. Li Yundong said with a straight face, This is good. You are an elder of the Fox Zen school, so you should play a pioneering role. With a bitter face, Chao Yi turned to Zhuang Yiting and Lu Yuehong and said, Then why don't the two of them play a pioneering role? They are my Shiji. Li Yundong casually pulled out two more little red flags and handed one to each of them. He said with a straight face, Don't even think about running away. One in the front, one in the middle, and one in the back. It's just right. Do your job. This time, the three of them couldn't laugh anymore. They could only take the little red flags with bitter smiles. For a moment, the three great beauties holding the flags walked in front with the 7 chattering little beauties. Li Yundong laughed happily behind them. He saw that the Fox Zen school was extremely eye-catching wherever they went. It was really a moving scenery. For a moment, the eyes of passers-by almost popped out of their sockets. They said one after another, Damn, which tourist group is this? This is too evil. Why are there so many beautiful women? Idiot. Don't you see the little red flag in their hands that says Building a Civilized and Healthy City? I think it's the urban management. Damn. Which urban management has so many beautiful women? Are you stupid? If you ask me, they must be the mistress of the city leaders. Well, that makes sense. Well, it's possible. The passers-by were talking about it, but Li Yundong pretended not to hear them. He swaggered through the city with a large group of beautiful women. Su Chan, Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin, who were beside him, were all extremely rare beauties. Wan Hongling and the disciples of the Fox Zen school were also rare beauties. Any one of them was extremely eye-catching. But the sudden appearance of so many people really attracted everyone's attention. Because Li Yundong wanted to find a big house. And it was best to find a big house that was connected together. He took the beauties to several places and looked at several houses. But they were all very dissatisfied. When they went to the 6th house, they came to a new community called Riverside Garden. Only then did they find 2 more suitable houses through an agent. The agent called the landlord. The landlord was a woman in her 30s with a plain appearance. When she saw that Li Yundong had brought so many beautiful women to see the house, she was suddenly shocked and thought, I've seen ostentatious people, but I've never seen such an ostentatious person. How rich does he have to be to support so many mistresses? Can this man stand it? Although the landlord was secretly ashamed of her inferiority because of these beautiful women, she thought, such an ostentatious guy must be very rich. I must make him pay today. When the landlord thought of this, the smile on her face became much more flattering. After all, in this world, no one would go against money. Go to see. And coincidentally, the landlord happened to have 2 houses, which happened to be opposite each other. And each was a duplex structure with 6 bedrooms and 3 living rooms, more than 180 square meters. The 2 rooms added together were more than enough for Li Yundong and the others to live in. Thinking of this, the landlord couldn't help but feel proud. She thought to herself, you have so many people to live in. Where else can you find such a good house? It's so big, so spacious, and you can move in with your bags. You can't find such a good house, even if you go all over Tian'an City. I'm going to make you pay today. Both of these houses were on the top floor, and the floor was only the 5th floor. Although it was not high and not very conducive for cultivation, Li Yundong's cultivation had already reached a higher level, so he did not need to live in such a high place anymore. Moreover, the main thing right now was to find a spacious enough room for these noisy little guys to live in. Li Yundong saw that the left side of the room was the dining room, and the right side was the living room. The floor-to-ceiling windows had good lighting, and the floor was also made of mahogany. The room was fully equipped with all kinds of appliances, making it look luxurious. There were also various kinds of appliances in each bedroom. It was truly a mansion. What was even rarer was that the 2 houses were next to each other. Even if something happened, Li Yundong could arrive in the blink of an eye. Li Yundong calculated the price in his mind, then glanced at Zhou Qin. Zhou Qin nodded slightly, indicating that the 2 houses were very good. Then Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan, who also nodded, indicating that she was satisfied. Su Chan looked at Li Yundong eagerly, trying to express her opinion, but when Li Yundong's eyes fell on her, he chuckled and directly jumped over, ignoring her. The little girl was so depressed that her face suddenly fell. Li Yundong wanted to rent these 2 houses, but when he glanced at the landlord, he saw that her eyes were shining, looking at him, as if she was looking at a moving mountain of gold. Li Yundong thought to himself, oh my, she's treating me like a sheep. There's no need to be so obvious, is there? Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He winked at Zhou Qin, asking her to talk to the landlord. Zhou Qin understood, and immediately pulled the landlord aside to talk. Then Li Yundong winked at Su Chan again. The little girl saw Li Yundong winking at her, and suddenly became energetic. She ran over, blinking her eyes hard without saying a word. Li Yundong chuckled, leaned over to Su Chan's ear, and whispered a few words. Hearing this, Su Chan burst into laughter. Li Yundong immediately glared at her, and she quickly covered her mouth with her hands. Her face was serious, but the corners of her eyes were full of smiles. She secretly looked back and saw that the landlord had not noticed, so she turned back and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I promise to complete the task." Li Yundong smiled and tapped her nose, then said loudly to Zhou Qin, "Zhou Qin, come with me." Zhou Qin smiled and greeted the landlord, then came to Li Yundong's side and looked at him in confusion. Li Yundong was not in a hurry to explain. He nodded to Zi Yuan and Wan Hongling, then took them out. When they came out, they stood in the corridor. Zhou Qin asked in confusion, "Master, what are you doing?" Wan Hongling also rolled her eyes at him. "That's right, you're just pretending to be mysterious." Li Yundong chuckled and gestured to them to keep quiet. "Keep your voice down. You'll understand in a moment." Zi Yuan and the others were puzzled, but they saw Su Chan and the little foxes starting to make trouble in the room. Su Chan's eyes rolled and she thought to herself, "Yundong wants me to find trouble, but I haven't been to many places. Well, I've only been to the amusement park." "Ah, yes, that's it." Su Chan walked around the room with her hands behind her back. The landlord also found that among the group of beautiful women, Li Yundong was the closest to this girl. Obviously, she was his favorite mistress. She thought to herself, "Well, as long as I coax her, this rich man will give me whatever price I say." Thinking of this, the landlord said with a smile on her face, "Beauty, what do you think? Is there anything you're not satisfied with?" Su Chan nodded and praised, "Not bad, not bad. This house is so good." The landlord was overjoyed when she heard this, and a smile bloomed on her face. Just as she was about to answer, she suddenly heard Su Chan's tone change. "But..." The landlord's heart skipped a beat, but she knew that Su Chan must be looking for trouble to lower the price. Lowering the price also showed that they liked the house very much and were sincere about renting it. The landlord was also an experienced person, so she was mentally prepared. She asked with a smile on her face, "But what?" Su Chan said with a face full of regret, "Your house is good in every way, but there's something missing." The landlord was relieved. She smiled and said, "What is missing? I can help you add it. Of course, the rent may be a little higher." Su Chan nodded and said, "Well, the price is not a problem, as long as you can make up for it." The landlord beamed. "No problem. What else do you need? Just tell me, beauty." Su Chan said with a smile, "I think this room is missing a roller coaster." "A roller coaster?" The smile on the landlord's face suddenly froze, as if she had been hit by a paralysis spell. She tried to squeeze out a smile, but the muscles on her face were so stiff that she couldn't move. She said dryly, "A what?" Su Chan looked at her strangely and said, "A roller coaster. Haven't you seen it?" "Alas, no wonder you don't know. Look at your house. You don't even have a roller coaster. Every house in my hometown has one." The landlord was shocked, and her voice changed. "Every house has one? You're kidding me, aren't you?" After saying that, she stared at Su Chan, trying to find some clues from her face. But Su Chan's face was serious. She looked at the landlord as if she were looking at a fool and a madman, as if it was the most incredible thing in the world that there was no roller coaster in the room. Su Chan said, "Yes, can you get a roller coaster?" The landlord stared at Su Chan for a long time, but she really couldn't find anything unusual. She couldn't help but be shaken. Could it be that she's talking about something else? As she hesitated, the little foxes began to make a noise. They said one after another, "You don't even have a roller coaster. Why are you still boasting?" "That's right, you country bumpkin. A roller coaster, we want a roller coaster." The landlord was already under a lot of pressure to stay with such a group of beauties. Now that she was in such a hurry, she immediately broke out in a sweat. She took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat on her forehead. She smiled dryly and said, "Beauty, I don't have a roller coaster here." Su Chan looked at her strangely. "Why don't you have one?" The other little foxes also started to make a fuss. "You can have one." The landlord didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I really don't have one." Su Chan sighed and said, "Then forget it. Do you have a space shuttle here?" "A space shuttle? This is even more exaggerated than a roller coaster." The landlord's mind was in a mess, and cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She kept wiping it away and said with a dry smile, "I don't have one either." Su Chan asked again, "Then, what about a 360-degree wheel?" The landlord was dumbfounded. "No." "What about a merry-go-round?" "No." The veins on the landlord's forehead began to throb. "What about an electric train?" "No." The landlord showed signs of going crazy. Su Chan asked a few more questions and sighed. "Then you have a bumper car, don't you?" The landlord was about to cry. I don't have one either. Su-chan sighed and said, You don't have anything here, but you still dare to rent a house. The little foxes shouted in unison. That's right, you don't have anything, but you still dare to rent a house. As soon as they opened their mouths, it was really like a chorus, magnificent and magnificent. The landlord sucked in a breath of cold air, and the blue veins on her forehead bulged. She finally couldn't stand it anymore and yelled, Bullsh *T. I'm renting a house, not running an amusement park. Chapter 334. Go to watch net. The landlord let out a hysterical roar, which almost made Li Yundong, who was hiding outside the door and eavesdropping, burst into laughter. Ziyuan and Zhou Qin also laughed so hard that they covered their mouths. Ruan Hongling even squatted on the ground and couldn't help laughing and scolding. Li Yundong, you're so bad. You actually instigated them to deliberately find fault with you. You're so bad, so bad. You're so bad from head to toe. Li Yundong also laughed and said, Who told this guy to think that I'm a rich man and want to rip me off? Go to watch net. 7K. OM. Doesn't she know that I'm a poor man? Ziyuan said with a smile. Who told you to go out with so many followers? Everyone thinks of you as a rich man. Zhou Qin also laughed and said, Master, your trick is too mean. Who can stand the noise of these little guys? As she spoke, she saw that the room was already in a mess. The little foxes were scolded by the landlord and became angry. One by one, they put their hands on their hips and put on the classic big teapot pose of a shrew shouting abuse in the street. They retorted rudely, I think you're the one who's talking nonsense. We all have them, but you don't. That's right. You don't know anything, but you think others don't know anything. What's an amusement park? Why have I never heard of it? Hey, you woman, hurry up and put all these things in, or I'll tear down your house. They quarreled, and the house was really in a mess. It was as if thousands of ducks and more than 10,000 sparrows had entered, making the landlord's head buzz. She wanted to refute, but as soon as she opened her mouth, she was drowned out by the noise of the little foxes. She couldn't even hear her own voice. The landlord's heart was full of tears. Can't I not rent it anymore? My aunties, I was wrong. Don't you wake up? I'm going deaf. Li Yundong was almost done. He walked in from the door and coughed dryly. He was so powerful that the whole room echoed with his dry cough. The little foxes immediately stopped talking and looked at him in unison. Leader, am I wrong? Li Yundong glared at them. Don't shout like that outside. The little foxes nodded in unison and retreated to the side with an aggrieved look on their faces. Su-chan, on the other hand, was standing behind the landlord, winking at Li Yundong with a smug look on her face, as if she was asking for a reward. Li Yundong pretended not to see it, and said to the landlord apologetically, I'm sorry. I've spoiled them too much. Watch net. 7K. OM. When the landlord heard Li Yundong's words, tears welled up in his eyes as if he had just met his savior. You're the most reasonable one, handsome. Ruan Hongling, who was eavesdropping on them at the door, suddenly spat softly. Bah, he's the worst. This landlord is so stupid that he doesn't even know that he's being tricked by him. Ziyuan smiled and said, If it were you, you would also faint. Ruan Hongling rolled her eyes disapprovingly. Li Yundong had no idea that someone was talking about him behind his back. He waved his hand at the landlord and smiled. My surname is Li. Call me Shaoli. The landlord didn't dare to call him that. She knew very well that a man who could be surrounded by so many beautiful women was definitely not an ordinary person. Call him Shaoli? If he didn't like it, he wouldn't even know he was in trouble. Although the landlord had been annoyed by the little foxes for a long time and her head was swollen, she still squeezed out a smile and said, Boss Li, just now you were arguing. Oh no, you talked for so long. It was really a bit difficult. You know, my house is a duplex structure. How could there be such things as an amusement park? Boss Li, if you don't want to rent it, you might as well say it. As the saying goes, business can't be done. It's good to make friends. At this time, the landlord had already begun to suspect that Li Yundong was the mastermind behind the scenes and wanted to drive down her price. Although she was reluctant to part with the deal, she was really depressed by the noise of the little foxes just now and didn't want to rent the house anymore. Li Yundong laughed and said, "Madam, you don't have to be like this. I didn't say I wouldn't rent it. You want to rent it?" The landlord looked at Li Yundong suspiciously and said, "I don't have those things you're talking about here." Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, "Don't take it seriously, little girl." The landlord suddenly felt that Li Yundong's words had touched her heart, and the idea in her heart was rekindled. She asked, "How much do you want to rent it?" Li Yundong asked with a smile, "I sincerely want to rent it." "Madam, you also sincerely name a price." The landlord had originally wanted to extort money from Li Yundong, but after Su Chan and the little foxes had made a scene, she had lost her temper. She calculated in her heart and said, "A house for 8,000 yuan a month." Li Yundong thought about it for a moment. Although he felt that the price of 8,000 yuan was reasonable, it was still a bit high for a third-tier city like Tiannan City. Li Yundong began to bargain with the landlord. "Ma'am, this price is a bit high," he said. "It's almost as much as a month's mortgage payment. Go to Kamwan." The landlord felt wronged. She had originally wanted to ask for 10,000 yuan a month, but recently, the state had introduced a very strict policy to suppress housing prices. Very few people were buying houses. The two well-decorated mansions in her hands couldn't be sold in a short time. Even if she wanted to rent them, there were very few people who wanted to rent such a house. It was rare to see a tenant like Li Yundong who rented two mansions at once. The landlord thought for a moment and complained, "Boss Li, this price is very affordable. This is a compound mansion of more than 180 square meters. I have to pay the mansion tax. Moreover, you are renting two houses at once, and I happen to have two. This kind of house is not easy to find." Li Yundong seemed to have expected this. He also said with a smile, "Yes, I also happen to rent two houses from you at a time. It's not easy to rent your house out here. Ordinary people won't rent your house, and it's not easy to find a tenant like me. Let's each make a concession." Su Chan and the others watched Li Yundong bargain with the landlord. One of the little foxes laughed in a low voice and said, "One of them calls her Boss Li, and the other calls her Madam. Leader is taking advantage of them." When the little foxes heard this, they all giggled. Su Chan, on the other hand, was very unhappy and glared at them. Only then did the little foxes react and quickly flatter her. "Shiji Su Chan, you're the lady boss." Su Chan snorted, raised her chin high, and looked proud. She said, "Let me tell you, Yundong has already said that I will be in charge of the store when it opens in the future. Be good for me. If you perform well, I will let you come to the store and have a good life with me in the future." When the little foxes heard this, their eyes lit up and they said one after another, Okay. Madam is wise and powerful. Madam will live forever." Su Chan put her hands on her hips and laughed proudly. Li Yundong heard them laughing, but he didn't know what they were laughing about. He couldn't help but turn his head and look at the noisy foxes with a strange expression on his face. The landlord's heart skipped a beat, and he thought to himself, "What are these girls doing? I can't stand their torment. Forget it, it doesn't matter who I rent. Although they are a little noisy, they don't look like bad people. They look more like a group of naive children." The landlord thought for a moment and said, "Boss Li, since you sincerely want to rent it, I'll give you a base price of 6,000 yuan. It can't be lower, and you have to rent it once a year. If the price is lower, I'd rather not rent it." Li Yundong immediately said, "Okay, that's the price. It's not a problem to rent it once a year." When the little foxes heard that the two of them had finally made a deal, they raised their arms and were about to cheer. Su Chan quickly glared at them and said in a low voice, "Shut up. We want the landlord to know that we are deliberately looking for trouble." Only then did the little foxes come to their senses. They covered their mouths one by one, not daring to breathe. After Li Yundong signed the contract with the landlord and paid the intermediary's fee, the little foxes burst into cheers. "Hooray! We have a home now. Leader is wise and mighty. Leader will live forever. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who did you learn this from? Su Chan hurried over and flattered. These are words from the bottom of our hearts. We don't need to learn it from anyone. The little foxes nodded like chicks pecking at rice and said in unison, "Yes, yes." Li Yundong felt a burst of nausea and hurriedly said, "Stop, stop. If you continue, I will become Constellation Immortal." At this time, Zhou Qin teased, "Constellation Immortal's life is as long as the heavens. What you said is from Dongfang Booby." Li Yundong glared at her, then turned around and said to Chao Yi and the others, who had been smiling silently, "Now that we have found a house, shall we divide the rooms?" Chao Yi smiled and said, "It's all up to you, leader." Li Yundong didn't refuse. He took Su Chan, Zhou Qin, and the 5 little foxes to one room, while Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, Chao Yi Lu Yuehong, and Zhuang Yiting took the 2 little foxes to the other room. After the group of people had divided the rooms, Zhou Qin said to Li Yundong, "Now that we have found a house, let's go look at the shop after lunch. I'm afraid that if we're late, it will be rented out." Li Yundong thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, let's strike while the iron is hot. But people are iron and food is steel. If we don't eat, we will be hungry. Let's find a place to eat first." After he finished speaking, everyone agreed in unison, especially the little foxes, who jumped up and down and cheered. They said in unison, "We want to eat the food cooked by leader." When Li Yundong heard this, he suddenly felt a headache coming on. "Hey, do you think I'm the leader or the chef? No, we are all going out to eat today. There are no dishes. How can we cook?" This was the first time the little foxes had gone out to eat since they had gone down the mountain. They immediately cheered again. "Hooray! We are going out to eat delicious food and drink spicy food." Li Yundong widened his eyes and said, "What do you mean eat delicious food and drink spicy food? Why do you make it sound like a gangster? Where did you learn these words from?" The little foxes didn't say anything. They turned their heads and looked at Su Chan in unison. Su Chan cursed in her heart. "These bastards betray me when they have something to do. Bastards. Damn it." Seeing that she couldn't avoid it, Su Chan could only smile at Li Yundong. "I was just saying it casually." Li Yundong glared at her as a warning, then said, "Let me say this in advance. When we go out later, you must listen to my instructions. Don't fight for food. If you don't listen, I won't take you out next time." When the little foxes heard this, they all answered crisply, "Yes, leader." As soon as they opened their mouths, their voices were delicate and extremely pleasant to the ear. Li Yundong thought to himself, "Alas, if only these little guys were more obedient." Li Yundong sighed inwardly and waved his hand. "Let's go out and eat delicious food and drink spicy food." The little foxes laughed and said, "Okay, let's go out and eat delicious food and drink spicy food with leader. Leader is wise and mighty. Long live the sect leader." Li Yundong glared at them and said, "Don't shout." The little foxes responded, "Okay, then we'll shout in a low voice." Li Yundong felt a headache coming on. "Not even in a low voice." The little foxes looked aggrieved. "Then we'll shout in our hearts." Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only wave his hand and say, "Forget it, I don't care about you. Just don't make a scene when we eat later." The little foxes immediately cheered. "Long live leader." As they said this, they cheered and walked out in a mighty manner. Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling looked at each other. Ruan Hongling was surprised and laughed at the same time. She said, "Why do I feel like they're going to parade in the street?" Zi Yuan also shook her head and said with a smile, "It's over. Leader Li Yundong will suffer in the future." Chapter 335. Go to watch net. The group of people went out of the door in a mighty manner. The little foxes were excitedly talking about where they were going to eat. Listening to their chatter, Li Yundong felt a little worried in his heart. Go to watch net. See, where could they go to eat with such a large group of people? Let's go to a restaurant. There were more than a dozen people here. Except for Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan, almost everyone was a big eater, especially the little foxes. They were really cruel and inhumane when they ate. Although he had 800,000 yuan in his hands now, he had just paid the rent, and he had to rent a storefront later. He needed money everywhere. Then again, no matter how rich he was, he couldn't afford to have them eat like this. Li Yundong was thinking about his headache when he suddenly had an idea. He laughed and said, "I have an idea." Zhou Qin, who was next to him, asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Li Yundong said proudly, "Let's go to the buffet." Zhou Qin was smart and immediately understood Li Yundong's intention. She immediately covered her mouth and laughed, but didn't say anything. The little girl had never been to a buffet before. She asked curiously, "Yundong, what is a buffet?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "It means that everyone can eat as much as they want." When Su Chan heard this, she immediately beamed with joy. "Really? That's great. Yundong, although the food you cook is delicious, I can't eat my fill every time." Li Yundong smiled and said, "This time, you can eat as much as you want. I promise I won't care about you. However, be careful not to become a little fat pig, or I will dislike you." Su Chan said with a smile, No, we cultivators will never get fat." Li Yundong laughed and didn't say anything. Su Chan turned her head and explained to the little foxes who were looking at her eagerly. When the little foxes heard that they could eat as much as they wanted this time, they immediately cheered. In their opinion, Li Yundong had brought them to live in a good house and take them to eat and drink. He was really 1,000 times better than the former leader Lu Yi. This time, the cheers of the little girls were really from the bottom of their hearts. They shouted in unison, "Long live the leader! Long live the leader!" Li Yundong laughed heartily. "Long live the buffet! May the buffet last through the ages." Zi Yuan watched from the side, laughing and shaking her head. "Really, you're a famous sect leader. How can you still act like a child?" Wan Hongling also laughed and scolded. "This person has never been serious before." The group of people went to an Amazon buffet restaurant that was very close to the shops on the shopping street. As soon as they entered the door, they immediately attracted everyone's attention. Watch net. 7K. OM. Coincidentally, the owner of the restaurant was also there. While greedily looking at the various beauties, he secretly rejoiced in his heart. With so many beauties coming to the buffet, he was going to make a fortune. Buffet restaurants loved the presence of beautiful women the most, because most beautiful women cared about their figures. They wouldn't eat this or that, and they would only consume a little bit of food. Naturally, the restaurant would make a lot of money. Li Yundong and the others found 2 big tables and sat down. Chao Yi and the others sat at one table with the little foxes, while Li Yundong, Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Zi Yuan, and Ruan Hongling sat at the other table. After Su Chan entered the restaurant, her eyes kept looking around, as if she was a thief. As soon as she sat down, she said eagerly, "Yundong, I'm starving. Can you let me find something to eat?" Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "Hurry up and wipe your mouth. You're drooling." Su Chan let out a cry and quickly wiped the corner of her mouth. Seeing that there was nothing wrong, she said angrily, "You're messing with me. Can you do it or not?" Li Yundong acted as if he were shooing away a fly. "Go ahead. Look at you. Oh my God, haven't you eaten for hundreds of years?" Su Chan giggled, turned around and ran away. When she passed by the little fox's table, she waved her hand, and the little foxes all stood up and followed her to the table. Li Yundong looked at their figures and turned his head with a smile. He shook his head and said, "I really can't do anything about them. Alas, I really don't know how the former leader led them." Zi Yuan took a sip of tea and said meaningfully, "It's easy to go down the mountain, but difficult to go up the mountain. Li Yundong, if you take them down the mountain, you will have to bear the trouble they cause after they go down the mountain. Watch net." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Don't scare me, okay? I stay close to her every day. What kind of disaster can happen?" Zhou Qin suddenly said, "Master, why do I feel that something is wrong?" Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Zhou Qin sat opposite him and said with a strange expression, "Master, do you remember that Su Chan once made a pagoda at my birthday party?" Li Yundong chuckled. "Of course I remember. Last time this little girl Before Li Yundong could finish his words, his expression suddenly changed. You're not saying that she's stacking the pagoda now, are you? Damn it, how could I forget about this? Zhou Qin's expression was strange. See for yourself. Li Yundong quickly turned around. When he saw what was in front of him, he suddenly gasped. He saw that Su Chan was holding 2 large plates in each hand. On the large plates, there was a tall pagoda stacked with all kinds of food. She was not petite, but compared with the 2 plates of food, she was simply small and exquisite. But what was even more exaggerated was that the group of little foxes behind her was also holding a pagoda in their hands. As they walked, the pagoda was on the verge of collapse, but every time it was about to fall, they would twist their waists like acrobats and stabilize themselves again. From the owner to the staff to the guests in the buffet, everyone looked at them with astonishment. After Su Chan put the 2 pagoda plates on Li Yundong's table with a thud, she turned around to share her experience in stacking the pagoda with the little foxes. As they talked, they turned to the dining area to get the dishes. The restaurant owner's legs went soft, and his back was sweating profusely. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The waiters and guests looked at Su Chan and the other little foxes as if they had seen visitors from outer space. Some guests even took pictures with their mobile phones. Li Yundong stared at the pagoda, which was half the height of a person, and thought to himself, "Oh my God, this is really the 8th miracle in human history. How did it stack up?" Zhou Qin covered one side of her face with her hand. She said with a face full of shame, "Master, I feel so ashamed." Ziyuan also turned her head to look out of the window and pretended not to know them. She lowered her voice and said, "Li Yundong, you are also the leader of a sect. If this kind of thing gets out, won't you be laughed at in the future?" Wan Hongling was dumbfounded as she watched the little foxes stack up another pagoda. She felt as if she was the one who was stacking the pagoda in front of everyone. She was so ashamed that her ears turned red. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. She sighed and said, "Oh my God, why am I with you guys? It's so shameful." Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He angrily rushed to the dining area and snatched the plate from Su Chan's hand. Then, he clamped her under his armpit and rushed out with her in his arms like he was holding a roll. Su Chan was shocked. She struggled and shouted, "I haven't eaten yet. Put me down. I haven't eaten yet." Li Yundong couldn't help scolding. "Eat your head. Aren't you ashamed of eating so much at once?" Su Chan cried out in grievance. "You said that I could eat as much as I could." Before the 2 of them went out, Su Chan's voice was loud and clear. Suddenly, everyone's eyes turned to Li Yundong. Although Li Yundong was determined and his skin was as thick as a city wall, he felt that his face was so hot at this time that it was on fire. He glared at Su Chan and said angrily, "You're still talking about it. Can't you go a few more times? Didn't I tell you not to stack the pagoda last time?" After that he shouted at Zhou Qin, "Zhou Qin, the bill." Zhou Qin answered and quickly ran to the counter with her head down to pay the bill. Then, she ran out again with her head down. Su Chan struggled in Li Yundong's arms and shouted, "Just pay the bill? I haven't eaten a little yet. At least let me take some away." Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. "Take away. I'll beat you until your head is full of bumps." As he said this, he snapped his fingers on Su Chan's forehead and patted her round but shouting, "Stand still." Su Chan let out a cry, covering her forehead with one hand and her buttocks with the other. She pouted, her face full of grievance. She muttered, "You're so annoying. You liar." As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes, ready to drip down. Li Yundong scolded her with a smile. "Don't pretend to be pitiful. I'll take you somewhere else to eat later. Don't embarrass yourself here. Do you still think it's the same as before? When the time comes, it won't just be me who will be embarrassed, but also the Fox Zen school." At this time, Chao Yi and the others also came out. The 3 Sherbas also nodded and said, "Leader is right." Then they went to reprimand the little foxes. Li Yundong saw that they had blocked the entrance of the restaurant tightly, attracting many people to look around. He said, Okay, let's go somewhere else to talk." The group of people walked out of the restaurant. Li Yundong thought about how they had wasted hundreds of yuan without eating anything, and his heart was filled with anxiety. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, observed his expression and said tentatively, "Master, I know a good restaurant in the nearby mall. Why don't we go there to eat?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "Well, let's do as you say. You are quite reliable." As he said this, he glared at Su Chan again. Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong and said with a face full of resentment, "You didn't keep your word. You liar." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Okay, then we'll order later. You don't have to order. Just watch from the side." How could Su Chan agree? As soon as she heard that she would be able to eat again, her previous unhappiness was immediately thrown away. She immediately rushed over to Li Yundong, took his arm and said with a smile, "Sir, don't argue with me. You are the best." Li Yundong snorted and said, "That depends on your performance." As he said this, he winked at Su Chan and said in a tone that only the two of them could understand, "Especially your performance when you get home." Su Chan's cheeks turned red and she said angrily, "You're so annoying. How dare you threaten me? I'll ignore you." While the two of them were flirting, Wan Hongling coughed dryly and said in a strange tone, "Hey, there are so many people waiting for you here." Li Yundong hadn't expected that a group of people eating at a buffet would cause so much trouble. He laughed dryly and said, "Let's go. Girls, eat and get to work." He said to Zhou Qin, "You lead the way and get to work." Chapter 336. Go to Watch Network. The group of people came out of the buffet restaurant and went to the restaurant in the shopping mall next door. Along the way, the little foxes passed by many clothing and accessories stores. The exquisite clothes dazzled them, and they almost couldn't walk. Go to the Watch Net. Su Chan was even more eager to see the beautiful clothes. She pulled Li Yundong's sleeve hard and kept winking at him. Li Yundong felt a headache coming on. How could he dare to agree? The last time he had bought clothes for Su Chan, he had directly made himself bankrupt. This time there were so many people. Who should he buy for and not for? If he bought all of them, no matter how rich he was, he couldn't afford these prodigals. If he only bought for Su Chan, wouldn't he, the leader of the sect, be talked about behind his back? No, absolutely not. Li Yundong deliberately pretended that he didn't see it, and strode forward. The little girl had no choice but to look back 3 times at every step, watching the beautiful clothes getting farther and farther away from her. When they finally reached the 9th floor and entered the restaurant, the group of people found a place to sit down. Li Yundong breathed a sigh of relief and said to the waiter, "Miss, please order." They divided into 2 tables and began to order the dishes they wanted to eat. But it was noon, and the restaurant's business was excellent. After ordering the food, it took a long time for the dishes to be served. Su Chan was a little upset. She was thinking about those beautiful clothes, so she pulled Li Yundong's sleeve and begged, "Yundong, I'll go and have a look. I won't buy them. I'll just have a look." Li Yundong sighed in his heart. "Little girl, everything I have is yours, but now I have to be responsible for the food, clothing, and housing of your Sherbua and Shiji." But Li Yundong couldn't help but think of the time when Su Chan had been alone in Shantang, so poor that she couldn't even bear to eat sesame seed cake, nor did she accept the handouts of the rich young masters. He thought for a moment, then his heart softened. He took out a stack of money, handed it to Chao Yi, and said, "I didn't let you live a good life as the leader of your sect. Take the little girls to see if there are any clothes you like. Take them as gifts from me to them." Chao Yi was shocked. "That won't do. Leader, how can we let you pay for it yourself? Besides, didn't you already buy clothes for us last time?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "How can one set of clothes be enough? Don't you want to trade? Don't refuse. Take the little guys out for a stroll. Anyway, it's only this much money. Just buy whatever you like. Watch net. 7K. OM. Chao Yi said gratefully and shamefully, "Leader, we this." Li Yundong waved his hand and said, "Don't talk about it. Anyway, the dishes won't be served until a while later. You guys go and look at the clothes." Seeing that she couldn't refuse, Chowie looked at Zhuang Yiting and Lu Yuehong. Lu Yuehong looked hesitant and didn't speak, but Zhuang Yiting smiled and said, "Leader is generous and considerate, so we won't refuse. 6 shimmy, just accept it." Li Yundong smiled and said, "You guys are going too." As he said this, he turned his head and looked at Zhou Qin. "Do you want to go with us?" Zhou Qin was a little tempted. She glanced at Li Yundong and asked, "Can I go?" Li Yundong saw that she was so careful that even her nature had been worn away, so he couldn't help sighing. He shook his head and said with a smile, "Of course you can go if you want." Zhou Qin was in the prime of her youth, and she was a stunning beauty. The more beautiful a woman was, the more she loved to be beautiful. How could she be an exception? When Zhou Qin heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately beamed with joy. "Then I'll go and have a look." Su Chan was overjoyed. She clapped her hands and said with a smile, Okay, let's go together." Li Yundong smiled and watched them go out to all kinds of clothing stores. He shook his head with a smile. After a while, he saw that Ziyuan was unmoved and was still drinking tea calmly. He asked curiously, "You're not going?" Ziyuan opened her mouth and was about to speak when she saw Wan Hongling pulling at her clothes under the table. Ziyuan changed her mind and said, "Well, let's go out and have a look." She followed Wan Hongling to the outside of the store and said with a slight frown, "Hongling, how can we cultivators be obsessed with worldly possessions? You don't want to see clothes, do you?" Wan Hongling tugged at Ziyuan's sleeve and said nervously, "No, Sister Ziyuan, I think I saw second sherbwa just now." Ziyuan was shocked and couldn't help but look back at Li Yundong, who was in the restaurant. She saw that Li Yundong seemed to have also sensed her gaze and was looking at her. Ziyuan nodded at him from afar and smiled. Then she pulled her into the noisy crowd and whispered, "Did you see second sherbwa? Where is she?" Wan Hongling kept looking around and said, "I saw those guys from the Fox Zen school enter a clothing store. Not long after, second sherbwa appeared nearby. I also saw her look at me. Go to the internet. You know, second sherbwa's cultivation is profound. If she deliberately glances at you, you will definitely be able to sense it." Ziyuan nodded slightly. "You're right. Second sherbwa has reached the peak of the yuanying phase. However, if second sherbwa appears nearby, oh no, Su Chan and the others of the Fox Zen school are in danger." Ziyuan's expression changed, and she quickly rushed into the clothing store next to her. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Su Chan and Zhou Qin, who were picking out clothes by the clothes rack, looking up. Su Chan beamed and said, "Sister Ziyuan, are you also here to see clothes?" Zhou Qin's observation ability was far better than Su Chan's. She saw the nervous look on Ziyuan's face, and her heart skipped a beat. She just stared at Ziyuan without saying a word. Then Wan Hongling also rushed in. Just as she was about to open her mouth and ask if the people of the Fox Zen school had seen second sherbwa, Ziyuan held her hand and squeezed it gently. She swallowed the words she wanted to say. Ziyuan smiled slightly at Su Chan and said, "No, we're just wandering around. The clothes here don't suit me. I'll go somewhere else with Hongling." Su Chan put down a milky white dress in her hand and said with a smile, "Sister Ziyuan, can I go with you?" Ziyuan was stunned. She wanted to find the whereabouts of second sherbwa, so how could she let Su Chan follow her? She couldn't help but frown slightly. Seeing this, Zhou Qin immediately said to Su Chan, "Su Chan, can you help me take a look at this dress?" Su Chan nodded and smiled apologetically at Ziyuan. "I'm sorry I can't go with you. I'll help Sister Zhou Qin look at the clothes." Ziyuan gave Zhou Qin a meaningful look, then smiled at Su Chan and said, "It doesn't matter. Take your time." After saying this, she left with Wan Hongling. The two of them walked back into the crowd and whispered to each other. Wan Hongling asked in confusion, "Sister Ziyuan, why didn't you let me ask just now?" Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "Do you really not understand, or are you just pretending not to understand? Second sherbwa has such a deep hatred with the Fox Zen school. Nearly 100 inner and outer disciples of the Fox Zen school have died because of the grudge between second sherbwa and the Fox Zen school. This time, The 6 great sects besieged the Fox Zen school because of Second Sherbois. Do you think the whole Fox Zen school hates her? If the people of the Fox Zen school find out where Second Sherbois is, how do you think they will react? Wan Hongling was even more puzzled. I know, but we are just reminding them. Is there anything wrong with that? Ziyuan smiled bitterly and said, You are smart, but why can't you see things clearly sometimes? Second Sherbois is still in the same sect as us, while the people of the Fox Zen school are outsiders to us. No matter what, we have a closer relationship with Second Sherbois. Who do you think we should help when the time comes? However, Wan Hongling sneered and said, Humph, Second Sherbois used to be indifferent to us. 9 years ago, she disappeared and hasn't appeared for so many years. Our Lingong sect has been bullied like this, but she hasn't helped us at all. Now as soon as she appears, she has caused such a big trouble. Humph, such a Second Sherbois, we don't need her. Ziyuan frowned slightly. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a voice in her ear. Hongling, is this how you talk about your elders? Ziyuan was shocked and immediately looked in the direction of the voice. Wan Hongling seemed to have also heard this. She was so shocked that she immediately looked around. After a while, she found the direction of the voice. The two of them looked around and saw Yan Feng looking at them from a hidden corner of the shopping mall. Ziyuan and Wan Hongling looked at each other and immediately chased after her. When Yan Feng saw that they were about to get close, she turned around and left. Ziyuan and Wan Hongling followed her all the way to a remote corridor. Yan Feng stopped, turned around, and looked them up and down. She said lightly, I haven't seen you for so many years. Hongling, you have become so beautiful. As she spoke, she looked at Ziyuan again, nodded secretly and said, Ziyuan, Shixiang used to dote on you the most. Now if he saw that you have become so beautiful and have such a high cultivation, I don't know how happy he would be. Ziyuan saw that although Yan Feng was still in her young spirit body at this time, and her body was emitting a faint fluorescence that was difficult for ordinary people to see with the naked eye, her qi had not weakened at all since she had been out of Moashi's body for so long. Instead, it showed signs of strengthening. She couldn't help but be surprised. Ziyuan knew that no matter what realm a person cultivated to, if the yin spirit or yang spirit went out of the body for too long, it would definitely cause the yin qi and yang qi to continue to dissipate between heaven and earth. In the end, the yuan qi would be exhausted, and the soul would also dissipate. This was why some cultivators who had just started cultivating couldn't let their yin spirits go out of the body for too long. The longer a person's primordial spirit went out of the body, the weaker it would be. However, Yan Feng's yang spirit had been out of the body for so long, but it was still so strong. This was really incredible. Ziyuan couldn't help but look at Wan Hongling. She also saw the shock and confusion in Wan Hongling's eyes. Yan Feng saw that the two of them were standing there in a daze, not saying a word. She said again, What's wrong? Do you really not want to recognize me as your Second Sherbois? Ziyuan was a cultivator who respected her master very much. She lowered her head and stepped forward, bowed and said, Second Sherbois, how have you been? Although Wan Hongling was dissatisfied, she still followed Ziyuan and bowed. She said softly, Second Sherbois. Yan Feng smiled and said leisurely, No wonder. I have never taken care of you since you were young. Especially 10 years ago, when your master and that bitch abandoned the sect. I also left you behind to seek revenge. Alas, at that time, the two of you needed someone to take care of you the most. The heavy responsibility of the Lingong sect fell on the shoulders of Ziyuan and Hongling. I don't know how you have survived so many years. Ziyuan remained calm and said lightly, No matter what, it can't be compared with the suffering Second Sherbois has endured for 9 years. Yan Feng laughed out loud and said, Ziyuan, I haven't seen you for 9 years, but you are still the same Ziyuan from before. You are gentle but firm, and there is a needle hidden in the cotton. Good, no wonder Shixiang likes you so much. You really have the bearing of a great cultivator. That's right, I came to you today for this matter. Ziyuan's heart tightened and she thought to herself, Here it comes. She asked, Second Sherbois, what's the matter? Yen Fang's face turned serious and she said coldly, Ziyuan Hongling, you are also the direct descendants of the Linggong sect of the Jingyi school. How can you mix with demons and evil people? I came here today to persuade you to turn back as soon as possible and stop before it's too late. As long as you are willing to help me destroy the Fox Zen school, I will tell you a big secret. Ziyuan frowned. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Yen Fang raise her palm and smile. Don't be in a hurry to speak. I can tell you first that the big secret that I have learned after lurking in the Fox Zen school for 9 years is related to your master. You have to think carefully before you answer me. Hearing this, Ziyuan's Taoist heart was in a mess. She blurted out, My master? What is it? The third chapter of 24 to 30 was finally over. Tang, I'm exhausted. Let me take a breath. Let me take a breath. We will continue the third chapter next week. Chapter 337. Go to watch net. Yen Fang looked Ziyuan up and down and said with a smile, Why, did you promise me that you would help me? Ziyuan frowned and took a deep breath. She was struggling in her mind. After pondering for a while, she said slowly, Second Shirbua, Li Yundong has taken over the Fox Zen school. And Li Yundong is a chivalrous and upright man. He said that he wanted to reorganize the Fox Zen school and make it a decent sect with a bad reputation. Watch net. 7K. I believe he can do it. Why don't you give him a chance? As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Yen Fang's face changed greatly, and she said angrily, Bastard, what did you say? This stinking brat messed up my plans last time, and I haven't even found trouble with him. Yet you're actually speaking up for him. Have you lost your mind? Ziyuan also said with a sullen face, Second Shirbua, my master once left a psalm, pointing out that my future cultivation will fall on this Li Yundong. That's why I got in touch with him. Over the past few days, I've discovered that not only is he a cultivation genius that only appears once every 500 years, but he's also a rare and extraordinary man. Ziyuan's face was as calm as water, and she spoke with confidence and assurance. Second Shirbua, let me ask you, a man who would rather suffer a heavenly tribulation and enforce justice on behalf of heaven, could he be a bad person? Second Uncle Master, let me ask you, a cultivator who is surrounded by peerless beauties all day long and still has the primordial young body of a child, can he be a bad person? Second Martial Uncle, let me ask you, a man who clearly knows that the other party is a fox demon, but is still infatuated with her, can he be a bad person? If he is, then there is a limit to how bad he is. I believe that one day, he will be able to turn over a new leaf and promote the righteous path of cultivation. Ziyuan said in a sonorous voice, Second Shirbua, whether you believe it or not, I firmly believe that Li Yundong will be able to transform the Fox Zen school, which has a bad reputation, into a righteous sect that promotes righteousness in the future. So Second Martial Uncle, I won't help you. On the contrary, I advise you to let go. Is there any enmity in this world that can't be resolved? You have caused the deaths of so many people in the Fox Zen school. Lu Yi is dead, and Ao Wushuang has been sealed by you. Second Shirbua, please stop. Yen Fang burst out laughing. She looked at Ziyuan and said meaningfully, Ziyuan, have you fallen in love with her? Ziyuan's expression changed drastically. She said in a panic, Second Shirbua, what nonsense are you talking about? Yen Fanglian sneered. You don't have to deny it. As an experienced person, I can naturally see through everything. Since you want to protect this stinking brat, then let me tell you, when the time comes, don't regret it. The panic in Ziyuan's heart only lasted for a moment. After all, she was a master with great cultivation. She quickly regained her composure and asked, What catastrophe? Yen Fang sneered and said, Do you think I want to destroy the Fox Zen school just for personal grudges? Humph. Yes, at first I just wanted to make trouble for Ao Wushuang, until I accidentally discovered a secret of the Fox Zen school. Hee. Ziyuan asked, What secret? Just as Yen Fang was about to speak, She heard footsteps coming from the stairwell. Her face changed and she swallowed her words. She sneered and said, "It won't do you any good to know now, but let me tell you, I will destroy the Fox Zen school. If you insist on going your own way, be careful that I won't be polite to you." After saying that, her figure flashed and quickly crashed into the wall of the stairwell. Then her figure quickly disappeared. Watch net. 7K. Wan Hongling was shocked. She cried out involuntarily, "Sister Ziyuan, isn't second Sherbua a yang spirit body? The body of the yang spirit should be a physical clone. It's impossible for it to go through the wall." Ziyuan's face was serious. Second Sherbua's primordial spirit has been cultivated to the peak of yuanying. She can switch between yin and yang at will. At the moment when she was about to hit the wall, she transformed her yang spirit into yin spirit, so she could pass through the wall. Wan Hongling sucked in a breath of cold air. Amazing! Second Sherbua's primordial spirit has been out of her body for so long, but she can still be so powerful. This is ridiculous. Ziyuan shook her head and said, "No, logically speaking, it's impossible for a person's yang spirit to be so powerful after being out of her body for so long. Even Zhang Sanfeng could only go out of his body for 3 days without his primordial spirit weakening. To be able to go out of her body for such a long time without her primordial spirit weakening at all, it's absolutely impossible." Wan Hongling's heart skipped a beat. Unless. Ziyuan also looked at her and nodded slightly. Unless she has already found a physical body to reside in. After Ziyuan finished speaking, her eyes suddenly lit up. She quickly turned around and rushed to the clothing store where the Fox Zen school had been. When she rushed into the clothing store again, Su Chan had just changed into a new milky white lace dress. She looked charming and lovely. As soon as she saw Ziyuan, she jumped over with a smile and said, "Sister Ziyuan, do I look beautiful in this?" Ziyuan looked her up and down and said with a smile, "Very beautiful. By the way, Su Chan, where are your 3 sherbas?" Su Chan blinked, pointed to the changing room, and said, "Over there. My 6th sherbua and 3rd sherbua are trying on clothes in the changing room. 5th sherbua came out a long time ago. Let's go." 7K. While she was talking, she saw the door of the dressing room creak open, and Zhuang Yiting came out. She was wearing a cheongsam, which made her look natural and charming. Su Chan greeted her with a smile and said, "3rd sherbua, you came out? Sister Ziyuan and the others are looking for you." Zhuang Yiting raised her head and asked curiously, "Zhenren Ziyuan, Zhenren Hongling, what can I do for you?" Ziyuan smiled and shook her head. "Nothing." As she said this, she took a meaningful look at the changing room, where Chowie was, and pulled Wan Hongling out of the door. After Wan Hongling followed Ziyuan out, she whispered, "Sister Ziyuan, why are you?" Ziyuan waved her hand and interrupted her. "Don't say anything. There are some things that you know in your heart. I'm not sure now. However, this matter is very strange. Let's wait and see." Wan Hongling nodded and asked again, "Sister Ziyuan, do you want to tell Li Yundong that we met second Sherbua?" Ziyuan thought for a moment, then shook her head and said, "Forget it, it's better not to say it. Some things will cause misunderstandings." Wan Hongling said, "All right." But in her heart she thought, "Sister Ziyuan, you don't want Li Yundong to know that you have fallen in love with him, do you? But have you fallen in love with this guy?" While the two of them were talking, Li Yundong was alone in the dining room, resting with his eyes closed. Suddenly, he heard a voice beside him. "Hey, isn't that Zhou Xian?" Li Yundong opened his eyes and saw a dignified middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes standing in front of him. He was holding 2 beautiful women in his arms and looking at him with a smile. Li Yundong took a look and thought, "Hey, isn't this Zhao Yuzhen, who wanted to force Chao Kefi to drink with him last time?" Li Yundong laughed in his heart. "It's really a narrow road for enemies. How did I run into this guy?" Li Yundong didn't stand up. He just raised his eyelids and looked at Zhao Yuzhen calmly, pretending not to know him. "You are." Zhao Yuzhen seemed to have forgotten the pain. He laughed, pulled a chair over, and sat down casually. Then, he beckoned the 2 women beside him to sit down as well. He said, "Little brother, the world is really small. I can meet you everywhere I go. Hee, how has President Chow been recently? You've made a lot of money with her, haven't you?" Li Yundong was not a fool. Naturally, he could hear that Zhao Yuzhen was secretly mocking him for living off a woman. In the past, he might have been angry in his heart, but what kind of person was he now? How could he care less about such a person? Li Yundong said with a smile, "Ah, I remember. You are President Zhao, who was drunk and shameless last time. Why? Do you want to drink with me again this time?" Zhao Yogan's expression changed when he saw that Li Yundong was trying to expose his wound, but he soon smiled again. He said to the two beautiful women beside him, "Young people are really hot-tempered, aren't they?" Although it was almost winter, Tiannan City was a southern city. The two women were dressed very fashionably and exposed. Their faces were covered with heavy makeup, and they looked like prostitutes. When they saw Li Yundong for the first time, their eyes lit up, and they looked him up and down with interest. At this time, when they heard Zhao Yogan's words, they thought in their hearts, "Not only is he hot-tempered, but he's also a handsome man." But they were living next to Zhao Yuzhen, so of course they had to go along with his words. The one on the left, who was slightly rounder, covered her mouth and said, "Young people are indeed hot-tempered, but he's not as calm as you, President Zhao." The one on the right laughed and said, "President Zhao is a successful person. You can't compare." Li Yundong felt strange when he heard this, but he still remained calm and looked at Zhao Yuzhen with a smile, as if he wanted to see what he was going to show off. Last time, Zhao Yuzhen had gone to make trouble for Li Yundong and wanted to teach him a lesson, but he had been humiliated by Li Yundong. Fortunately, he had reacted quickly at that time and escaped the humiliation of being drunk. Otherwise, he would have been humiliated in the future. Zhao Yuzhen had always taken this matter as a great humiliation, and he had always wanted to find an opportunity to take revenge. Today, he had found two lovers to attend a small banquet. When he passed by, he found Li Yundong sitting alone in the restaurant. He suddenly remembered the old hatred, so he came over with two beautiful women to put on airs and show off. Zhao Yuzhen sat there boldly and tapped the teacup in front of him with his fingers. The round-faced beauty beside him obediently poured him a cup of tea, and the pointy-faced beauty on the left picked up the cup and offered it to him. She said in a sweet voice, "President Zhao, please have some tea." Zhao Yuzhen nodded and took the teacup in his hand in a very ostentatious manner. Then he said to Li Yundong proudly, "Little brother, women are still so considerate. If he had to please a woman for the sake of money, his life wouldn't be smooth sailing, right? Although it's capital to let a woman spend money for you, it's not satisfying. It's better to make money for a woman to spend money and let a woman please you. This kind of thing will be more enjoyable, right?" Li Yundong snickered to himself, and the smile on his face became wider. He nodded and said, "Yes, you're right." Zhao Yuzhen raised his chin and said arrogantly, "Little brother, I think you are also a talented man. Apart from other things, you are indeed better at drinking than others. Why don't you follow me? In the future, you can help me drink at the dining table. I will definitely not treat you badly. Well, I'll give you 5,000 yuan a month. What do you think?" The round-faced beauty next to him exclaimed, "No way. You can earn 5,000 yuan by drinking every month? Is it so easy to earn money? President Zhao, you're biased. I want it too." The other beauty also said coquettishly, "President Zhao, you can't favor one and discriminate against the other." Zhao Yogan's face was full of satisfaction. He said, Well, you greedy demons, I've given you enough money. I'll make it up to you when we go back. Hee, I'll give you a good meal." His last words were meaningful. The two women giggled and flirted with him. "President Zhao, you're so bad. You're so annoying." Zhao Yuzhen hugged them and said proudly to Li Yundong, "Little brother, what do you think? It's such a good condition. Do you agree?" Li Yundong saw that he had been putting on airs until now, and even asked him, a dignified cultivator and the leader of a sect, to help him drink. He couldn't help but raise his head and laugh. Chapter 338. Go to watch net. Li Yundong's laughter hurt Zhao Yogan's self-esteem. He said with a sullen face, "What? Do you think the money is too little?" Li Yundong waved his hand with a smile and said, No. In fact, if I were really a college student who hadn't graduated yet, and only helped you drink, it would be a lot of money for a month. Go to watch net." Zhao Yogan's anger turned into joy and he said, "That's right. What kind of future can you have with a woman? Why don't you come to me?" Li Yundong refused with a smile. It's not necessarily that there is no future with a woman, and it's not necessarily that there is a future with a man. However, I still like to be alone. It's good like this. President Zhao, I appreciate your kindness. Zhao Yogan's face darkened again. What do you mean? Isn't it good to be with me? Humph. Young people nowadays are all arrogant and think that they are great. I think there are many who have high standards but low ability. Li Yundong smiled but didn't say anything. The two beautiful women beside him also said, "That's right. It's good to follow our President Zhao. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Another beautiful woman also tried to persuade him. "Handsome man, don't get it wrong. How much money can a college student make after graduating? It's not even enough to pay the rent. Where can you find such a good thing?" Zhao Yuzhen scolded them with a smile. "You two little girls, do you want to make me a cuckold just because I'm handsome?" When the two beautiful women heard this, they said in a coquettish voice, "President Zhao, we are infatuated with you." Zhao Yuzhen laughed wildly and said, "It's true that you are infatuated with my money." Li Yundong looked at Zhao Yogan's ugly behavior with a smile. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a voice say, "Li Yundong, who is this person?" Li Yundong turned his face and saw Wan Hongling looking at Zhao Yuzhen, who was sitting in front of the table with a strange expression. Zi Yuan was standing behind her, her eyes a little confused, as if she had something on her mind. He suddenly remembered that when he had first met Wan Hongling, it was also when he had met Chao Kefi and become enemies with Zhao Yuzhen. At that time he was really a young boy. He didn't even know that he had eaten Rinyuan Jindan, and he was cultivating with Su Chan in a muddle-headed manner. But now, he had become a famous master of the younger generation in the cultivation world, and the leader of the Fox Zen school. Although he was the same person, the changes between the two were really incomparable. Watch net. Li Yundong felt a little emotional in his heart. He had originally wanted to tease Zhao Yuzhen, but now he had given up. He smiled at Wan Hongling and said, "It's nothing. I used to know someone. He came over to say hello, and asked me to join him." When Zhao Yuzhen saw Wan Hongling, he was stunned. He thought to himself, how can this girl be so beautiful? What's more, her temperament is even more outstanding. The two beauties beside me are not bad. Compared with her, they are like chickens compared to phoenixes. They can't be compared at all. But when his gaze followed Wan Hongling and fell on Zi Yuan, his mind suddenly rumbled, and his head almost exploded. He opened his mouth and wanted to shout, "There is such a beautiful woman in this world. Is there really a fairy in this world? What kind of man in this world can have such a fairy?" Wan Hongling's pride and beauty, as well as Zi Yuan's ethereal temperament, stunned Zhao Yuzhen and the two beauties beside him. For a moment, they were a little stunned and couldn't come to their senses. Wan Hongling looked at Zhao Yuzhen impatiently and slapped the table. "Hey, you're taking our seat. Please make way." Zhao Yuzhen was shocked and stood up in a daze. He saw Wan Hongling and Zi Yuan sitting opposite Li Yundong. He pointed at Zi Yuan and Wan Hongling in disbelief, and then at Li Yundong. He stammered, You. Wan Hongling saw that he had been looking at her lecherously before, so she was secretly unhappy. She said angrily, "What do you mean by you? Hey, don't you have a place to sit? This restaurant is such a big place. Don't you know where else to go?" Zhao Yuzhen could be considered a successful entrepreneur. Usually, everyone was polite to him. Even if Chao Kefi hated him, she had to speak politely for fear of making him unhappy. When had he ever met someone who was so rude to him? Zhao Yuzhen was stunned by the scolding and couldn't come back to his senses. He subconsciously found a table next to him and sat down. But as soon as he sat down, he stared at Li Jiandong, Zi Yuan, and Wan Hongling. When he saw that Li Jiandong was talking and laughing with them, his heart felt as if it had been knocked over. Although the two beauties next to him were proud of their beauty, compared to Ruan Hongling, they were immediately inferior, let alone compared to Zi Yuan. They didn't even dare to look at Zi Yuan for fear that they would die of inferiority if they looked at Zi Yuan for too long. Seeing that Zhao Yuzhen was staring at the three of them with his eyes full of jealousy, the pointy-faced beauty added fuel to the fire and said, "Humph, you're so beautiful, but you're still a mistress." But when the round-faced beauty saw that Zhao Yogan's face had darkened after hearing this, she immediately said, "What? It's obviously this handsome guy who has a mistress." Hearing that, Zhao Yogan's complexion obviously improved a lot. Watch net. 7K. OM. But not long after, a large group of people came into the restaurant. All of them were stunning beauties, and the people in the restaurant almost had their eyes fall out of their sockets. It was all for Suchan. Suchan was wearing a snow-white dress. She skipped over to Li Yundong, turned around and said with a smile, "Do I look good?" Li Yundong smiled and pinched the little girl's nose. "Good, good, good. Sit down." With that, he patted the seat beside him. Suchan took Li Yundong's arm and sat down with a smile on her face. She said, "I didn't spend too much of your money. I'm a good girl." Li Yundong nodded with a smile and said, "You'll have to ask your Sherbo first." Suchan immediately turned around and pulled Chao Yi's arm. "Sherbo, tell me, am I very obedient?" Chao Yi had also changed her outfit, making her look mature and sexy. She laughed and said, "Chana is very obedient. I didn't even buy expensive clothes. I just wanted to save money for you." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Everyone sit down. The dishes are ready. They'll be served in a minute." Chao Yi smiled at the little foxes behind her and said, "Hurry up and thank leader." The little foxes grinned and said, "Long live leader, long live leader." Li Yundong smiled and waved his hand. "Stop shouting. You make me sound like the leader of a gang. Hurry up and sit down." At this time, all the people of the Fox Zen school rushed to the table next to them. But when they saw Zhao Yuzhen sitting at their table with two beautiful women, they immediately turned around and asked Li Yundong, "Leader, who is this?" Li Yundong glanced at Zhao Yuzhen faintly and said, "Mr. Zhao, do you want to eat with us?" Zhao Yogan's face suddenly turned red. No matter how stupid he was, no matter how unconvinced he was, he knew very well that so many beautiful women in front of him were following Li Yundong's lead. It was impossible for him to be a gigolo and let such a group of beautiful women support him. The two beauties beside him were seriously stimulated today. First, they saw Ruan Hongling and Zi Yuan, and they were shocked by their extraordinary temperament. Then there was such a large group of beauties, and all of them were of the highest quality. Just looking at them made their eyes dizzy. It was impossible to pick out any one of them who was slightly inferior. When the two of them saw the little foxes coming to drive them away, they immediately looked at Zhao Yuzhen eagerly. Zhao Yuzhen originally wanted to show off to Li Yundong and get back at him, but he didn't expect that Li Yundong in front of him was no longer an ignorant person. He had kicked an iron plate. His face turned green and red. He gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go." After that, the three of them got up and ran out of the restaurant, as if they were running for their lives. When they were far away from the restaurant, they slowed down. When the two beauties felt that they were far away from Su Chan and the others, they slowly calmed down. They only felt that they had been standing with so many beautiful women just now, and they were so inferior that they didn't even know how to walk. But now that they couldn't see them, the two beauties' minds became active. After all, their money still fell on Zhao Yuzhen, and they still had to make a living. Seeing that Zhao Yogan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot, the pointy-faced beauty smiled cautiously and said, "Mr. Zhao, where are we going to eat?" Zhao Yuzhen suddenly got up and slapped her. "Eat, eat, 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 eat. Damn you. Get out of here, all of you." The pointy-faced beauty was stunned by the slap. She covered her face and couldn't come to her senses. The round-faced beauty next to her quickly took her hand and pulled her aside. The pointy-faced beauty, who had been slapped, looked at Zhao Yuzhen with resentment in her eyes. She gritted her teeth, stamped her feet, and left the building with the round-faced beauty, leaving Zhao Yuzhen standing there alone, gasping for breath. The more Zhao Yuzhen thought about it, the more depressed he became. Damn it, this guy was still living off a woman half a year ago. How could he be so arrogant after half a year? F***ck. Where did he find so many beautiful women? He randomly picked one, and she was better than all my women. How could this be? He was born narrow-minded, especially after his career was successful. He became even more arrogant. He had to buy what he liked, and get the women he liked. That was why he had pestered Chao Kefi, and finally made a grudge against Li Yundong. Zhao Yuzhen stood at the door of the building with his hands on his hips, and thought to himself, damn it, I've never been defeated by the same person twice in a row in so many years. No, I must vent my anger. But how can I vent my anger? Hire a murderer to teach me a lesson? Forget it. As a businessman, it's not easy for me to get away from this kind of thing. If I'm found out, I'll definitely be blackmailed by those officials. Zhao Yuzhen thought about it for a while but couldn't think of a good way. He stood alone at the foot of the building and thought about it. He didn't know how long he had been in a daze. Suddenly, he heard the familiar voices of Li Yundong and the others. He was shocked and then came to his senses. He hid to the side and followed them. Zhao Yuzhen saw that Li Yundong had come to a more prosperous area of the commercial street and walked to a shop for rent. He suddenly had an idea. Does this guy want to rent a shop? When he saw Li Yundong and the others looking up and down at the shop, he was more and more sure of his idea. Zhao Yuzhen knew very well that if they wanted to rent a commercial shop on this kind of pedestrian street, they had to find the local Bureau of Commerce. Coincidentally, he happened to know the director of the local Bureau of Commerce. Zhao Yuzhen took out his mobile phone from his pocket and called the director. Then he asked, Director Wang, right? Haha, I'm Zhao Yuzhen. Haha, no, I won't disturb your dinner. I want to ask you for a favor. Zhao Yuzhen told Director Wang that Li Yundong and the others wanted to rent a shop, and then added fuel to the fire. I have some grudges with this guy. Director Wang, are you? Hearing this, Director Wang asked casually on the phone, what's the background of this guy named Li Yundong? Zhao Yuzhen laughed and said, he's just an ordinary college student. He wants to start his own business. He's young and arrogant. Director Wang said in a drawling tone. Now the country encourages college students to start their own businesses. Mr. Zhao, it's not appropriate for you to do this, is it? Zhao Yuzhen hated him in his heart. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Director Wang suddenly say in a drawling tone. However, college students nowadays are indeed very impetuous. Giving them a little setback can also promote their growth. Zhao Yuzhen was overjoyed. He laughed and said, Director Wang, you're right. Director Wang, you have a high level of thinking. I'll invite you to the sauna some other day. Well, okay, that's a deal. Zhao Yuzhen hung up the phone and glanced at the shop opposite proudly. He thought to himself, you can be arrogant and proud. If you offend me, I'll make you achieve nothing. Happy New Year's Day to all my readers. Today, I'd like to add one more chapter. Chapter 339. Go to Kamwang. The shop that Zhou Qin was interested in was a shop on the pedestrian street of Tiannan City. It had 2 floors and was about 300 square meters. It used to be a small electrical appliance market, but because it couldn't keep up with the times, its business was gradually taken away by large shopping malls. Its turnover had been declining year after year, and the boss couldn't stand it anymore. So he was thinking about transferring the shop in his hands and doing other business. Go to Kamwang. Li Yundong followed Zhou Qin to the shop and looked up and down. He whispered to Zhou Qin, this shop is good. It's spacious and bright, and it's facing the street, but the rent is probably quite high. I don't know if we can afford it. Zhou Qin explained with a smile. I've inquired about it. It's 300,000 yuan a year. Li Yundong was shocked. 300,000 yuan a year? That's a lot of money. Zhou Qin said. It's a lot. We rented 2 houses before, which costs more than 100,000 yuan a year. But those are residential houses, and this is a shop facing the street, so it's naturally expensive. Li Yundong thought for a while, then turned to Ziyuan and asked, Ziyuan, what do you think? Ziyuan was a little distracted and said blankly, Ah? What did you say? Li Yundong felt strange. He had never seen Ziyuan like this before. He couldn't help but ask, What's wrong with you? You seem to have something on your mind. Ziyuan calmed down and smiled slightly. Nothing. Are you asking about the rent? Seeing that she was unwilling to tell him, Li Yundong stopped asking. He wanted to find a chance to ask her in private. He said, Yes, I think the price is a little high. 300,000 yuan a year is a lot of money. Even if we pay it once a year, we will have paid all our money. Let alone the decoration, we will be strapped for money again. Li Yundong continued. You see, although we have a lot of tea products on hand, we can't just open a tea house with Thai guanyin. Can we? We will definitely have to buy more tea, and then we will have to spend money again. As he said this, Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly. I don't know how expensive it is if I'm not in charge. Only after becoming the leader did I realize that money is really not money. I used to think that all cultivators could abstain from eating and didn't have to spend a penny on food. Now I know that it's all nonsense. Ziyuan smiled and said, Dharma wealth, companions and earth treasures, you can't cultivate without money. Great cultivators also needed to eat and drink. The theory of cultivation originated from traditional Chinese medicine. It was a scientific and rigorous thing. Even if it was explained by Western scientific theories, some things could still be explained. Watch net. The so-called law of conservation of energy can explain the law of cultivation. People can't create a part of energy out of thin air. They must absorb and borrow the energy around them, or through eating, cultivating and other behaviors to store the excess energy in the body, and only release it when needed. When Zhou Qin heard Ziyuan and Li Yundong suddenly talking about cultivation, she pricked up her ears and listened attentively. Hearing this, she suddenly asked, Is Anidia a lie? Ziyuan glanced at her. Seeing that she was smart and eager to learn, she smiled at her approvingly and said, No, whether in ancient times or modern times, Anidia exists. It's just that it's a little different from what people understand. What are the differences? Zhou Qin asked. Ziyuan glanced at Li Yundong and said with a smile, This is your disciple. Why don't you explain? Li Yundong smiled and said, Test me? Well, let me explain. Li Yundong said to Zhou Qin, Anidia is also called Broken Valley or Ju Valley. As the name implies, you can see from the literal meaning that it actually means that you don't eat the 5 grains. However, most people think that Anidia means not eating anything, just eating wind and drinking dew. Think about it. If all of us cultivators ate wind and drank dew, how much money would we save? Do I need to worry so much? Zhou Qin laughed and said, But in reality? Li Yundong chuckled and said, But in fact this is a big mistake. Anidia is only to get rid of the filthy qi in the body. Because people eat grains, they inevitably have urine and feces which are extremely dirty. How can they become immortals? But if they don't eat grains, where does human nutrition come from? People have to consume energy to live. Where does this energy come from? Could it be that he really came here to eat wind and drink dew? Isn't that a big joke? Zhou Qin became more and more curious. Then where does the nutrition come from? Li Yundong smiled and said, Where does it come from? To eat other things. Abstaining from grains is just not eating the 5 grains and miscellaneous grains. Eating other things is not the 5 grains and miscellaneous grains. Zhou Qin was surprised and surprised. No way. Then won't eating other things cause, urinate and defecate? Li Yundong laughed and said, It depends on what you eat. The Book of Northern Qi once recorded a hermit cultivator of Mount Langya. He practiced the art of Anidia, but he ate pine nuts, Atractylodes macrocephala, poria, and other raw medicines every day. The Book of Old Tang also recorded a person named Wang Yuanji, who was also a cultivator, who practiced the art of Anidia. What did he eat every day? Ganoderma. He ate Ganoderma as a meal. Of course, he didn't eat grains. Zhou Qin opened her mouth wide. No way he ate Ganoderma as a meal? How much would this meal cost? Ziyuan chuckled and said, So, now do you know why wealth ranks second among cultivation, wealth, companionship, and earth tools? In the past, many cultivators in ancient times had poor families and little money. They yearned for cultivation, but they didn't have the money to buy all kinds of medicinal materials necessary for cultivation. So they went up the mountain to dig medicinal materials and cultivate in the mountains. Go to the internet. 7K. OM. Zhou Qin sighed and said, No wonder those cultivators lived in the mountains in ancient times. And all of them were proficient in traditional Chinese medicine. It turns out that they wanted to be self-sufficient. But why haven't I heard of these things in modern times? On January 7, 1988, the People's Daily reported on a 25-year-old girl from Yuxingtang Village, Xiangjiapa District, Maqing City, Hubei Province. This girl's name was Xiong Zaiding. When she was 15 years old, she had a serious illness. After she escaped from danger, she didn't eat any food for 10 years. When she got out of bed, she moved as usual and smiled freely. At that time, it was a strange story. Li Yundong smiled and said, This girl must have met a great cultivator and taken some Anidia pill or some miraculous medicine. Ziyuan glanced at Li Yundong and nodded. You guessed right. Back then, Celestial Master Zhang of Arjingyi School happened to pass by and fed her the immortal Anidia pill, which saved her life. Li Yundong asked curiously, Then she didn't cultivate later? Ziyuan shook her head and said, No, a serious illness burned her cauldron. Even if she was saved, it would just be a broken cauldron. Zhou Qin asked curiously, The immortal Anidia pill? Is there such a thing in this world? Ziyuan smiled and said, Yes, I still remember the prescription. Zhou Qin asked curiously, Tell me about it. Ziyuan opened her mouth and said, The immortal Anidia pill is made of sealwort, jade bamboo, sesame, asparagus, jujube, black bean, Ganoderma lucidum, pine nuts, Atractylodes macrocephala, mulberry, walnut, honey, ophiapagon, and other traditional Chinese medicine and ingredients. There are also mineral medicines such as cinnabar, realgar, mica, and other medicinal ingredients. Zhou Qin was dumbfounded. Oh my, these things are all health food with high nutritional value. That means you don't have to eat grains. How much money would it cost to eat this every day? At this time Li Yundong laughed and said, You also understand. Ziyuan smiled and said, Among the cultivation sects, only a few big sects with strong financial resources can practice Anidia cultivation, and only a few leaders and direct disciples can take this kind of immortal Anidia pill. Even the leaders of ordinary sects can't afford it. So we in the cultivation world also have a nickname for the immortal Anidia pill. Li Yundong and Zhou Qin asked in unison, What nickname? Ziyuan pursed her lips and said happily, The pill of ruin. After that, the three of them burst out laughing in unison. Su Chan, who was messing around in the shop, heard their laughter and came over curiously. She blinked her eyes and asked, Yundong, what are you talking about? Why are you laughing so happily? Li Yundong chuckled and touched her head. It's nothing. What do you think? Su Chan nodded excitedly. Well, it's very good. We all like it here very much. Li Yundong said to Zhou Qin. Then let's rent this place. I won't dawdle. Zhou Qin saw that Li Yundong had been frowning because of the high rent. He had discussed it with her and Ziyuan for a long time, and had been hesitant. But now with a word from Su Chan, he immediately made a decision. It could be seen that Su Chan's position in his heart was very important. Zhou Qin sighed in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She nodded with a smile and took out her mobile phone. I'll call someone from the Bureau of Commerce. After that, she walked to the side to make the call. Li Yundong nodded with a smile. He wondered in his heart. Didn't Zhou Qin's relationship with the officials break down because of her father's fall? How can she still contact the Bureau of Commerce? But he quickly thought, a centipede is dead, but not dead. After all, the Zhou family still has some power in Tiannan City. But not long after, Li Yundong saw Zhou Qin walking over with a livid face. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and he asked in a deep voice, "What's wrong?" Zhou Qin's face was cold, and she didn't speak for a long time. After a while, she gritted her teeth and sneered. "Seeing that our Zhou family has fallen, the tea has cooled down. Now he's putting on airs." As she said this, she looked at Li Yundong in confusion. "Master, have you offended someone? As soon as I said that you wanted to rent this store, they immediately went back on their word." Li Yundong said in surprise. "Me? No. Wait." Li Yundong said thoughtfully. "In fact, there are quite a few people I've offended. Lu Chuan in the school is one, and I've offended the 6 great sects in the cultivation world. Not to mention the Jingyi school. In the business world, I've offended Zheng Yuming and Zhao Yuzhen." Zi Yuan said helplessly. "Remember last time on Mount Tianlong? I told you not to kill too much so that you wouldn't be able to do anything in the future? Do you understand now? There are many villains in this world. You can crush them with one finger in a head-on confrontation, but they are best at stabbing you in the back. You don't even know who is trying to harm you." Li Yundong said with a wry smile. Yes, Jimren Zi Yuan is right. What should we do now? Zhou Qin, is there any room for negotiation?" Zhou Qin shook her head and said, "If my father was still in his position, nothing would be a problem. But now?" Li Yundong didn't want Zhou Qin to carry a psychological burden. Although he was secretly unhappy, he still smiled and comforted her. "It's okay. Tang Sanzang will encounter 81 difficulties when he goes to the West to obtain Buddhist scriptures. Our difficulties are nothing." Zhou Qin sighed and said, "The shop here is the most ideal. The other shops are not very ideal." Li Yundong smiled and said to Su Chan, "Go and call your Sherbua and Shiji. Let's go." Seeing that things were not going well, Su Chan answered obediently and said goodbye to the Fox Zen school. Then, the group of people left the shop together. When they arrived at the pedestrian street, Zhou Qin sighed and said, "Master, it's all my fault. If I had just—" Li Yundong interrupted her and said with a smile, "Don't say it. It's not your fault. As the saying goes, there will be a way when the car comes to the mountain, and the boat will go straight when it comes to the bridgehead. There must be a way. If it doesn't work, it's okay not to rent this place. Let's go and see if there are any good shops in other places." The others nodded one after another. Just as they were about to leave, they suddenly heard an old voice shouting in surprise and joy, "Little Magic Doctor?" Li Yundong found the voice familiar, but he didn't take it to heart. Zhou Qin's heart skipped a beat. She turned around and took a closer look. She saw an old lady in a dark blue short coat and a pair of navy blue cloth shoes looking at her with a smile on her face. Zhou Qin recognized that the old lady in front of her was the old lady who had been very close to her when she had been in the hospital. She was surprised and happy and shouted, "Old Lady Sue! In the afternoon, I will go out to watch a movie. I wish everyone a happy new year. Thank you to everyone who voted for me in the new year. Thank you for your support and encouragement." I cupped my hands and bowed. Chapter 340. Go to watch net. Old Lady Sue hadn't dared to confirm it before, so she had just called out tentatively. At this time, when she saw Zhou Qin turn around, she realized that it was indeed them. She knew that Zhou Qin was here, so the boy beside her must be the little magic doctor who had cured her. She smiled and said, "Little Zhou, it's really you. Watch net." At this time, Li Yundong turned around and also recognized the old lady in front of him. It was the old woman he had cured in the hospital. He smiled and said, "It's you, old lady." Granny Sue held Zhou Qin in one hand and Li Yundong in the other. She looked very enthusiastic. Her old face was smiling like a chrysanthemum. "Little magic doctor, you left in a hurry last time. I wanted to thank you, but I couldn't find you. God has eyes, I finally met you today. You're not allowed to run away. I have to thank you properly. You cured my illness last time. My body is so good now. It's like I'm 10 or 20 years younger." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Grandma, this is what I should do." Old Lady Sue said disapprovingly, "Hey, what are you talking about? How can there be such a natural thing in the world? Good people must be rewarded. Otherwise, who would be a good person in this world? If they were all bad people, wouldn't the world be in chaos? No, I must thank you properly today. You all know, have you eaten yet? Let me count the number of people here. Old Lady Sue counted them one by one with a smile. She smiled ambiguously at Li Yundong and said, Good heavens, more than a dozen beautiful girls are as beautiful as flowers. Little magic doctor, you are so capable and lucky. Let's go eat together. Li Yundong smiled and said, Grandma, we've already had dinner. We're in a hurry to look at the shop now. Old Lady Sue asked curiously, Why are you looking at the storefront? Do you want to open a shop? Zhou Qin explained with a smile. Mrs. Sue, we want to open a boutique tea house. You know, drinking more tea can keep you healthy, get rid of diseases, and prolong your life. Mrs. Sue said happily. Well, if your tea house is open, I will come to your tea house every day to drink tea. Not only me, but also my friends. Since it's opened by you, little miracle doctor, we are at ease. Li Yundong was both happy and worried. He was happy that there was already a group of stable customers here before the shop opened. He was worried that where could he find a shop? Seeing the bitter smile on Li Yundong's face, Zhou Qin smiled and said to Old Lady Sue, Old Lady Sue, we appreciate your kindness, but this shop may not be open yet. Old Lady Sue asked, What's wrong? Is there any problem? Zhou Qin sighed and said, We took a fancy to this store and made an agreement with Director Wang of the Industry and Commerce Bureau. But in the end, he went back on his word. Watch net. 7K. OM. Old Lady Sue opened her mouth wide and said, You're going back on your word? Why? Why did this kid go back on his word? Why didn't he do what he promised? Zhou Qin shook her head and said, I don't know. When I called him just now, he didn't say anything. Maybe he offended someone. Old Lady Sue slapped her thigh and said angrily, This brat, give me the phone. I'll tell him. Zhou Qin and Li Yundong looked at each other in surprise. Li Yundong asked curiously, Old Lady Sue, can you help us with this matter? Old Lady Sue laughed and said, This brat is my son. Do you think I can help you? Li Yundong and the others were all overjoyed. Zhou Qin smiled and dialed the phone. Director Wang said impatiently on the phone, Hey, didn't I say that this matter can't be done? Zhou Qin didn't wait for him to finish speaking. She smiled and handed the phone to Old Lady Sue. Old Lady Sue shouted into the phone, as if she were holding a walkie-talkie. Wang Dongliang, you little bastard, get over here quickly. Bang! The sound of something falling came from the phone. Wang Dongliang asked in surprise, Mom, why is it you? Old Lady Sue said loudly, Brat, I'm waiting for you at number 138 Dongha Road now. If I don't see you for half an hour, don't come back to my house for the rest of this year. After that, she pressed the button to turn off the phone. Old Lady Sue raised her head with a smile and said to Li Yundong, Let's wait here for a while. This brat will come later. Let's go to the internet. 7K. OM. Sure enough, after waiting for about 10 minutes, a Honda swaggered into the pedestrian street. A man about 1.8 meters tall, about 30 or 40 years old, got out of the car. He was wearing the uniform of the Bureau of Industry and Commerce, and had a strong smell of alcohol on him. It was Wang Dongliang, the director of the Bureau of Industry and Commerce. Wang Dongliang glanced at Li Yundong. When his eyes swept over Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others beside Li Yundong, he was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. He said in surprise, Where is this child from? Why did he bring so many beautiful women out to play? In his opinion, Li Yundong must be the son of an official or a rich man, especially when he saw Zhou Qin standing beside Li Yundong and faintly looking at him. He was more and more certain of his opinion. In the officialdom, it was common to follow those in power and trample on those who had lost their power. But although Zhou Qin had lost her power, the daughter of the Zhou family had a strong character, which had spread throughout the officialdom of Tiannan City. Almost everyone was in awe of Zhou Qin's fiery character. Although Wang Dongliang was not afraid of Zhou Qin, a beautiful woman who had lost her power, in his opinion, a woman like Zhou Qin would follow a man so obediently. How capable did this man have to be to subdue her? What kind of background did this man have? Wang Dongliang thought quickly and thought to himself, I miscalculated. Zhao Yuzhen, that bastard, actually set me up. I drank too much and agreed to him too quickly. Wang Dongliang kept rolling his eyes, trying to think of a way. He smiled and nodded to Li Yundong, Zhou Qin, and the others, then said to Old Lady Su with an apologetic smile, Mom, why did you call me over in such a hurry? Old Lady Su didn't stand on ceremony. She raised her hand and slapped his scalp. You little brat, don't you know what you've done wrong? Wang Dongliang dodged and said with a bitter face, Mom, we're on the street. Pay attention to your image. Old Lady Su became even angrier. She bent down to take off her shoes and hit him with them. You still care about your image? You little rascal. You've made your mother unable to be a proper person. You've made your mother lose all her face. Wang Dongliang covered his head with one hand and pulled Old Lady Su to the door of the shop. He cried out with a sad face, Mom, what did I do? Tell me clearly. Old Lady Su panted and said, Tell me, did you promise to rent this shop to Zhou Qin? Wang Dongliang's heart skipped a beat, and he thought to himself, Sure enough, but how did Zhou Qin know my mother? Wang Dongliang had been in the officialdom for a long time, and had long become a wily old fox. He asked slyly and tentatively, Mom, how did you know Zhou Qin? Old Lady Su said angrily, T. Your mother met her when she was in the hospital. Wang Dongliang smiled bitterly in his heart. Mom, how could you cause trouble for me when you were in the hospital? I asked you to live in the advanced nursing room, but you refused. Now it's all over. But he absolutely couldn't say this out loud. Wang Dongliang smiled apologetically and said, So you're a fellow patient? Old Lady Su spat. Bah, you jinx. She pulled him over, pointed at him and said, Do you know who this is? Wang Dongliang had long wanted to get information out of him. He straightened up, stretched out his hand with a smile and said, Hello, I haven't asked for your name yet. Li Yundong smiled calmly and said, I don't dare, Li Yundong. Wang Dongliang thought to himself, It's really him. Old Lady Su said from the side, You little brat, my illness was cured by him. This is the little miracle-working doctor. Wang Dongliang looked at Li Yundong with wide eyes and said, Are you the little miracle-working doctor that my mother always talks about? I've heard so much about you that my ears have become calloused. Seeing you today, it's really not as good as hearing about you. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Old Lady Su, you flatter me. Wang Dongliang saw that Li Yundong was young, but his temperament was really extraordinary, especially when it came to dealing with people. He had the demeanor of a great master. He was secretly surprised, and his face became more and more enthusiastic. Hello. I've always wanted to thank you in person, but I haven't found a chance. I didn't expect that I would rush into the temple of the Dragon King today. I'm really sorry. Wang Dongliang saw that Li Yundong was surrounded by beautiful women, and he really didn't look like an ordinary person. He couldn't figure out his background, and his mother was making a fuss, so he could do him a favor. He took advantage of the situation and said, You want to rent this shop, don't you? No problem, I'll go back and approve it. Li Yundong was overjoyed, but he didn't show it on his face. He just smiled faintly and said, That's great. But how many years do you want to rent it? Wang Dongliang said, Generally, there are 2 years of rent, and there are also 3 years of rent. Li Yundong asked, But I have limited funds on hand. Can I rent it once a year? Wang Dongliang looked embarrassed. As soon as he hesitated, Old Lady Su immediately slapped him with the sole of her shoe and shouted, What else are you thinking? What's the difference between renting it once a year and once every 2 years? It doesn't matter who I rent it to, but to the little miracle-working doctor. He can benefit society. I'm still waiting to drink his tea. Wang Dongliang's arm was covered with gray shoe prints, and he looked embarrassed. He smiled bitterly and said, Mom, don't make trouble. We have rules. Seeing that Old Lady Su was about to make trouble again, he quickly said, But rules are dead, and people are alive. Wang Dongliang thought for a moment and said, It's not impossible to rent it once a year, but you have to pay 300,000 yuan in full. Before he could open his mouth, old lady Sue next to him opened her mouth wide and said in surprise, 300,000 yuan? Are you a robber or a hooligan? Last year it was 200,000 yuan. And this year it has risen to 300,000 yuan? No, 200,000 yuan. Don't you know that the country is now suppressing housing prices? You're blatantly going against the country. Wang Dongliang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mom, these are two different things. Can you stop making a fuss? I'm begging you. Our Bureau of Industry and Commerce has a task target every year. Old lady Sue said angrily. What bullshit task target? Who are you fooling? Do you think I don't know your tricks? Doesn't the extra money go into your pockets? No. I don't care about others, but the little miracle working doctor wants to rent this shop. So I must take care of it. The little miracle working doctor has done me a favor. So I have to repay him. 200,000 yuan for a year rent. Do as you see fit. Anyway, I'm telling you today. If you don't agree, don't call me mother in the future. I don't have an ungrateful son like you. Chapter 341. Go to Watch Network. Wang Dongliang was completely speechless. He looked around with sweat all over his face, then pulled Li Yundong aside and said with a wry smile, Brother, as you can see, I have no choice but to agree today. Go to Kanban. 7K. Do me a favor. I can rent this shop front to you, but you can't tell anyone else. Otherwise, I'll be out of luck, and your shop front will be gone too. Li Yundong laughed and said, Director Wang, that's for sure. In the future, when my tea house opens, you can come more often. I see that you don't look well, so I guess there's something wrong with your liver. It's good for your liver to drink more tea here. Wang Dongliang didn't take it seriously at all. He just wanted to leave as soon as possible, so that his mother wouldn't slap him with the soles of her shoes again. He waved his hand and said, Let's talk about it when I have time. You can go to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce later. I'll ask someone to help you get things done. I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. Li Yundong didn't ask him to stay and said with a smile, Okay, see you later. Wang Dongliang turned to old lady Sue with a flattering smile and said, Mom, are you satisfied now? Old lady Sue's anger turned to joy and she said, That's more like it. Go and do your thing. There's nothing for you to do here. Wang Dongliang was depressed. Oh, she really comes and goes at my beck and call. Gloomily, he got into the car, started the car, and drove away. Li Yundong and the others looked at each other, and then cheered in unison. The little foxes even high-fived each other to celebrate. Su Chan smiled and held Li Yundong's arm. She sighed and said, Yundong, we finally have our own territory. Li Yundong laughed and scolded. You make it sound like we're a group of gangsters. Old lady Sue looked at Su Chan curiously and muttered in her heart, Who is this young magic doctor's girlfriend? Xiao Zhou or this girl in front of me? She muttered in a low voice. If gangsters can get so many beautiful women, then the welfare of the underworld is too good. Although old lady Sue's voice was low, Li Yundong and the others could hear it clearly. They all laughed out loud. The matter of renting a house had taken a turn for the better. Li Yundong smiled at old lady Sue and said, Grandma, if it weren't for you today, I would have to run a lot. Watch net. Old lady Sue waved her hand with a smile and said, No. I just happened to meet you at the right time. If it weren't for your excellent medical skills and medical ethics, I wouldn't have helped you, right? At the end of the day, you are a good person. In this world, good people will be rewarded. Li Yundong laughed and said, Yes, you're right, Grandma. Why don't we find a place to eat? I want to thank you properly. Old lady Sue had warmly invited Li Yundong and the others before, but now she smiled and declined. Forget it. I thought you came out to have fun, so I invited you. But it turns out that you came out to take care of the shop. Now you have to hurry to sign the contract. And then you have to work on the design, decoration, and many other things. Haha, this old woman will not disturb you anymore. Zhou Qin also smiled and said, Old lady Sue, you are our great hero. If we don't thank you properly, we will feel uneasy. Old Lady Sue laughed and said, "It doesn't matter. Aren't you going to open a tea house in the future? I'll just come and sit. When the time comes, make some good tea for me. By the way, I like to drink Thai guanyin. Well, Bilyuakun is also good." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Grandma, I don't have any other tea here, but I have a lot of Thai guanyin." Old Lady Sue smiled and said, "That's great. I'll come here often. Don't think I'm annoying." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Of course not. I'm looking forward to having a distinguished guest like you." Old Lady Sue looked Li Yundong up and down, then nodded and praised. "Little magic doctor, you are really good. You are young, skilled and handsome. You are really a talent. If I had a daughter, she would definitely marry you." Her words made the others cover their mouths and snicker. Wan Hongling even taunted, "Grandma, don't you see that this guy is destined to be in love? You don't have to join in." Old Lady Sue laughed, waved her hand and turned to leave. "I'm leaving. I'll come to see you another day." Li Yundong watched Old Lady Sue leave with a smile, then sighed to Ziyuan and the others. "Now I believe that there really is karma in this world. Let's go to the internet." 7K. OM. He looked at Zhou Qin and said, "If I hadn't seen you in the hospital, I wouldn't have treated Old Lady Sue. Now she wouldn't have returned the favor and helped us." Zhou Qin also said with emotion, "Yes, if you hadn't killed young Master He with heavenly thunder, I wouldn't have been lying in the hospital." Li Yundong sighed, then turned to Su Chan and said, "If I hadn't met you, so many things wouldn't have happened." As he said this, Li Yundong gently stroked the little girl's soft black hair. "God wanted me to meet you." The two of them looked at each other, and Su Chan smiled sweetly. Her eyes curved into crescent moons, which was extremely beautiful. After solving the problem of the shop, Li Yundong and the others went straight to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce. The person in charge of the Bureau of Industry and Commerce had obviously received the news. As the saying goes, it is easy to get things done with someone in the court. In less than 10 minutes, everything was settled. After finishing the formalities and paying the money, Li Yundong said, "Today's harvest is not small. We should go back now, and then move to the new house tomorrow." Ziyuan nodded and said, "Well, I believe everyone is tired today. Go back and have a good rest." After returning home and having dinner, the little foxes were more excited than the other after a day outside. They were chattering and making a lot of noise in the living room. Seeing that they were making too much noise, Chowie scolded them. "The asterisk stars, do you really think you came down the mountain to play? Don't you need to do cultivation? Go meditate and practice qi for me." The little foxes were frightened by her, and immediately sat down on the carpet in the living room to meditate and practice qi. As soon as they quietened down, the whole house became much quieter. Li Yundong was cleaning up the dining table when he saw Su Chan also meditating and practicing qi behind him. He curiously stepped forward and patted her on the shoulder, motioning for her to come to one side. Then he asked softly, "Why are you also practicing qi?" Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, "Of course, I'm also a cultivator. My Shiji and Shimi are all practicing qi, so of course I have to follow them." Li Yundong chuckled and tapped her small pointed nose. "You still know that you are a cultivator? I saw you making so much noise these days, so I thought you had forgotten about it." Su Chan said with a smile, "In the past I couldn't calm down. I didn't even solve the problem of living and eating every day, so naturally I couldn't calm down and cultivate. Now it's all right. We don't have to squeeze together like now, and we've found a suitable shop. When the time comes, we can solve our own livelihood problems and cultivate in peace. If I don't cultivate faster, I won't have any hope of catching up with you for the rest of my life." Li Yundong also chuckled. "Yes, my cultivation has also been delayed these days." Speaking of this, he suddenly saw Zhou Qin, who was busy washing dishes in the kitchen. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He smiled gently at Su Chan and said, "Go and practice qi. I won't disturb you." Su Chan noticed Li Yundong's gaze. She rolled her eyes and asked tentatively, "Yundong, are you going to teach Zhou Qin cultivation?" Li Yundong nodded and sighed. "Yes, she has done so much for me. It's time for me to repay her. I'm going to start teaching her cultivation. Suchan nodded and said, Indeed. Then you have to teach her well. Li Yundong smiled and said, She is my eldest disciple. Of course, I will teach her everything I know. Do I need you to tell me that? Suchan was a little jealous. She took Li Yundong's hand and whispered, No, you can't just teach her. You have to teach me too. Li Yundong held her in his arms and chuckled. He said in a low voice, Didn't I teach you? Suchan blinked in confusion. Since when did you teach me that? She asked. Li Yundong smiled and said, Didn't I teach you the 5 dragons embracing pillar last time? Suchan said angrily, That doesn't count. I want you to teach me the heavenly Jindan technique. Li Yundong pinched the tip of the little girl's nose and said with a chuckle, Silly, the heavenly Jindan technique is a very unique cultivation method. It is extremely powerful. Only when your cultivation is high will it be useful to practice it. If you practice it without a high cultivation, not only will you not be able to cultivate to a higher realm, but you will also be held back by the heavenly Jindan technique and shackle your cultivation. Suchan asked curiously, Why is that? Li Yundong smiled and pointed at the gallbladder on the little girl's abdomen with his finger. The heavenly Jindan technique cultivates the qi of the 5 viscera and 6 bowels of the human body by cultivating the qi of the 5 viscera and 6 bowels. If your original courage is not strong, then your cultivation is extremely limited. This is like lifting a barbell. If you only have the strength of 80 kilograms, you can naturally only do 80 kilograms of work. If you force yourself to do it, you will hurt your meridians, muscles, and bones. Suchan suddenly understood. I see. You mean that I can only cultivate if I have enough strength? Li Yundong nodded and said with a smile, You are worth teaching. Sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Last time, Lin Yozheng's cultivation was not enough, so he forced himself to practice the heavenly Jindan technique. As a result, he woke up very early and couldn't continue cultivating. In the end, he had evil thoughts and greed, and in the end he hurt himself. Suchan made a face and said, This guy is so bad. He deserves it. Li Yundong chuckled and patted the little girl's head. You go and practice qi first. I'll go talk to Zhou Qin. Suchan nodded obediently, then found a place in the living room with her Shiji, sat cross-legged, and began to meditate and practice qi. Seeing that she was meditating, Li Yundong smiled and called Zhou Qin to the room alone. Ever since she had acknowledged Li Yundong as her master, she had never been alone with him. When she saw that he had called her into the room, it was obvious that he had something private to talk about. She couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She asked, Master, what's the matter? Li Yundong nodded and said to Zhou Qin, Go and close the door. Zhou Qin turned around and closed the door, then stood respectfully to the side. Seeing that she was so reserved, Li Yundong smiled and said, Don't be so nervous. Although we are friends and now master and disciple, there is no need to be so nervous. He pulled over a chair and said, Sit down. I have something to tell you. Zhou Qin became more and more nervous. She sat down carefully, her feet only touching half of the chair. Her eyes were fixed on Li Yundong, and her fists were unconsciously clenched. Li Yundong smiled and said, Ever since you took me as your master, I have been busy and had no time to teach you. Now that I've finally gotten a clue about everything, I can finally free up my hands to teach you how to cultivate. Today, I called you in for no other reason than to establish a real master-disciple relationship with you. Secondly, I want to pass on 3 powerful magical weapons to you. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.